Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something that'll completely flip your perspective on beauty standards. We're talking about why being too beautiful in history was a curse. And I'm not kidding when I say curse. We're talking literal death sentences, political assassinations, and lives destroyed all because someone was too gorgeous for their own good. Forget everything Hollywood told you about being the fairest of them all. This isn't some Disney fairy tale where beauty equals happily ever after. This is the real story, the one they don't teach you in history class. And trust me, after tonight, you're going to look at every Instagram filter and beauty trend completely differently. So, before you get too comfortable thinking that being beautiful would solve all your problems, hit that like button if you enjoy this kind of deep dive into the darker side of history. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Are you team I'd rather be beautiful and cursed, or team give me that peasant anonymity any day? Now, dim the lights, maybe grab some popcorn, you're going to need a tan. Let's jump into a world where being too beautiful could literally get you killed. Picture this, you wake up in ancient Rome, circa 50 BCE. The sun streams through the marble columns of your villa. Servants rush to attend to you, and you catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished bronze mirror. You're absolutely stunning. We're talking Helen of Troy level gorgeous. Your skin is flawless, your features perfectly symmetrical, your body sculpted like a Greek statue. Congratulations, you just won the genetic lottery and simultaneously signed your own death warrant. See, in Rome, beauty wasn't just admired, was commodified, weaponized, and politicized in ways that would make modern influencers break out in a cold sweat. And if you were a woman, oh honey, you just became the most dangerous person in the empire without even trying. Let me paint you a picture of what your average Tuesday would look like as a beautiful Roman woman. You start your morning ritual, and I do mean ritual, because beauty in Rome was basically a full-time job. First, there's the lead-based face paint. Yes, lead. The same stuff that makes kids dumber and adults dead. But hey, it gives you that fashionable pale complexion that screams, I'm so wealthy, I never have to see sunlight. You're slaves because, let's be real, if you're this level of beautiful, you're probably from money there, mixing antimony for your eyebrows, crushing beetles for that perfect red lip stain, and preparing a mixture of crocodile dung and mud for your face mask. I wish I was making this up. But here's the thing that would absolutely terrify you. Every single beauty treatment is potentially lethal. That gorgeous pale complexion, it's literally poisoning you. Those rosy cheeks from crushed cinnabar, that's mercury sulfide, slowly destroying your nervous system. Even your perfume, made with lovely ingredients like arsenic, is turning you into a walking chemical weapon against yourself. Think today's beauty standards are toxic. At least your foundation won't give you actual lead poisoning. Well, probably not. But the real danger isn't the makeup, it's what your face represents. Because in Rome, a beautiful face was political currency. And political currency could buy you power, enemies, and a very creative death. Let's say you're noticed by someone important. Maybe it's a senator, maybe it's a general, maybe God's help you it's someone in the imperial family. Suddenly, your face isn't just your face anymore. It's a statement piece, a trophy, a weapon in political games you never agreed to play. You want to marry for love? Too bad. Your beauty makes you too valuable as a political alliance. Your father or guardian is already calculating which Roman bigwig could benefit most from having you on their arm at the next gladiator games. And here's the kicker: once you're married to power, you become a target. Every enemy your husband has now sees your face and thinks leverage. Every ambitious woman in Rome looks at you and thinks obstacle. Every emperor with wandering eyes looks at you and thinks mine. Take Valeria Messalina, wife of Emperor Claudius. Breathtakingly beautiful, politically savvy, and absolutely doomed from the moment she married into power. Historians describe her as having the kind of beauty that stopped conversations and started wars. Sounds romantic, right? Wrong. Messalina's beauty made her so powerful that she basically ran Rome, while her husband stumbled around being generally confused about everything. She held orgies that were really political meetings, seduced senators to secure votes, and used her looks to build the kind of network that would make modern politicians weep with envy. The problem, she got too good at it, too confident, too beautiful and too powerful for the comfort of literally everyone else in the empire. The result, at 26, she was executed on the orders of the very husband who had once been bewitched by her beauty. Her crime, being too effective at using what nature gave her. Quick question for you. Drop a comment and let me know. Would you rather be incredibly beautiful but constantly in danger, or perfectly average but safe? Because I'm telling you right now, after researching this video, I'm team aggressively mediocre looks all the way. But wait, it gets worse. Alright, now let's transport you from the marble halls of Rome to the forbidden city of Imperial China. Different continent, different century, same problem. Your face is about to ruin your life. You're in the Tang dynasty, around 750 CE, and you've just been selected as a concubine for the emperor. The selection process itself should have been your first red flag. Thousands of women examined like prize horses, judged on everything from the arch of their eyebrows to the size of their feet. But you made the cut. Congratulations, you're now officially the property of the most powerful man in the world. Trapped in a golden cage with several hundred other beautiful women who see you as direct competition for survival. Your day starts before dawn, not with freedom or choice, but with preparation. Your beauty, which got you into this mess, now has to be maintained at a level that would exhaust modern beauty gurus. First, there's your skin. We're talking about a skincare routine that involves pearls ground to powder, bird's nest soup applied as face masks, and jade rollers that cost more than most people's houses. Your complexion needs to be so perfect it looks like porcelain, because that's literally what you're competing against. Then there's your hair. Not just styled, but architected. We're talking about constructions that require multiple servants and take hours to complete. Hair ornaments made of gold, jade, and precious stones that weigh so much they give you constant headaches. But hey, at least you look imperial while suffering. And the clothes. Layers upon layers of silk, each one more restrictive than the last. Sleeves so long you can't use your hands properly. Robes so elaborate you need help walking. You're essentially a living, breathing art piece, beautiful and completely non. But here's what movies never show you. The sheer, psychological warfare of being one of hundreds of beautiful women. Fighting for the attention of one man who holds the power of life and death over all of you. Every morning, you wake up knowing that your survival depends on being not just beautiful, but more beautiful than Wu Zixin down the hall, smarter than Consort Li in the East Wing, and more charming than whoever caught the Emperor's eye last week. And these women, they're not your friends. They're your competition in a game where losing doesn't mean going home embarrassed, it means disappearing entirely. Maybe you're demoted to servant status. Maybe you're married off to some provincial governor. Or maybe you just ... vanish. The Emperor has absolute power, remember. If he gets bored with you, if you age out of his preferred demographic, if you make one wrong move in the complex dance of court politics, you're done. And in a system where your value is entirely based on your appearance, aging isn't just inevitable, it's a death sentence. Let me tell you about Yang Guifei, considered one of the 4 great beauties of ancient China. We're talking about a woman so gorgeous that the emperor literally forgot to run the empire because he was too busy writing poetry about her eyebrows. Emperor Xuanzong was so obsessed with her beauty that he neglected his duties, promoted her family to ridiculous positions of power, and basically turned the imperial court into his personal shrine to Yang Guifei's face. Sounds like the ultimate success story for a beautiful woman, right? She got the most powerful man in the world to fall completely in love with her. Except that level of imperial obsession made her the most hated woman in China. When the An Lushan rebellion broke out, partly because the emperor was too busy staring at his girlfriend to notice his empire falling apart, guess who got the blame? Not the emperor who started the whole mess. Yang Guifei. The soldiers demanded her death as the price of their continued loyalty. The emperor, faced with choosing between his beloved and his throne, chose the throne. Yang Guifei was forced to commit suicide at age 38, strangled with silk scarves, while the emperor wept and did absolutely nothing to save her. Her beauty, which had elevated her to the heights of power, became the justification for her death. She was too beautiful, too distracting, too dangerous to the stability of the empire. And speaking of dangerous beauty standards, let's talk about foot binding. Because nothing says your beauty is more important than your basic human functionality, quite like deliberately crippling women for aesthetic purposes. If you were born into the upper classes during foot binding's heyday, your beauty regimen would include having your feet broken and bound starting around age 6. The goal, 3-inch lotus feet that were considered the height of feminine beauty and elegance. The reality, a lifetime of constant pain, limited mobility, and infections that could literally kill you. But hey, at least your tiny, deformed feet look delicate in silk shoes. This practice continued for over 1,000 years because the aesthetic of helplessness women, so beautiful and refined they literally couldn't walk properly, was considered the ultimate in feminine appeal. Think about that for a minute. A beauty standard that required women to be physically disabled. That's not empowerment through beauty, that's imprisonment with extra steps. Before you think this is all ancient history, ask yourself, how different are today's beauty standards? We may not be breaking feet anymore, but we're still surgically altering bodies, injecting toxins for smoother skin, and spending fortunes on procedures that can literally kill us. The methods change, but the underlying message remains the same. Your natural beauty isn't enough, and the pursuit of perfection is worth almost any sacrifice. Drop me a comment. What modern beauty standard do you think future historians will look back on with the same horror we feel about foot binding? Okay, time hop with me to Renaissance Italy around 1500. You're walking through Florence, and everywhere you look, there's art celebrating the human form. Sounds like a great time to be beautiful, right? Wrong again. See, the Renaissance didn't just celebrate beauty, it commodified it, studied it, and turned it into a competitive sport with deadly consequences. And if you happened to be born with the kind of face that could launch 1,000 ships, you were about to become very familiar with the phrase, "Be careful what you wish for." Let's say you're a young woman in Florence, blessed with the kind of classical features that Renaissance artists literally dreamed about. Congratulations, you're about to become very, very famous in ways that will probably ruin your life. First, there's the modeling itself. And no, we're not talking about today's Instagram-worthy photo shoots. Renaissance modeling meant standing perfectly still for hours at a time, often nude, in cold, drafty studios, while some guy with paint-stained fingers stares at you intensely and occasionally asks you to adjust your pose slightly to catch the light better. The pay, minimal. The social status, non-existent. The chances of maintaining your reputation, zero. Because here's the thing about Renaissance society that art history classes conveniently skip over. Posing for artists, especially nude, was considered only slightly more respectable than prostitution. Sometimes it actually was prostitution, because artists weren't exactly rolling in money and models had to eat somehow. Take Simonetta Vespucci, the face that launched countless Renaissance paintings. She was the inspiration for Botticelli's Birth of Venus, among others, and she was absolutely stunning, the kind of beautiful that made grown men write terrible poetry and start fights in taverns. She was married to Marco Vespucci, yes, related to Amerigo, but that didn't stop half of Florence from falling in love with her face. She became the unofficial muse of the Renaissance, the standard against which all other beauties were measured. The result, she died at 22, possibly from tuberculosis, possibly from the stress of being the most famous face in Italy. Because when you're that level of famous for your looks in a time period without paparazzi laws or personal security, every day becomes an exercise in survival. Artists fought over the right to paint her. Wealthy patrons competed to commission portraits featuring her face. She couldn't walk through Florence without causing what we'd basically consider a riot today. And after she died, her image lived on in dozens of paintings, her face staring out from gallery walls for centuries, frozen in eternal beauty, while the real woman was just ... gone. But models weren't the only beautiful people with problems during the Renaissance. Let's talk about what happened when you were both beautiful and wealthy, because that combination was like painting a target on your back and signing up for Game of Thrones, Italian edition. Renaissance Italy was essentially a collection of city-states constantly at war with each other, both militarily and economically. And in this environment, beautiful women from powerful families weren't just people, they were chess pieces in political games played by men who viewed marriage as international diplomacy. Your beauty made you valuable as a bride, but it also made you dangerous as a potential tool for enemy states. Marry you to the wrong family, and suddenly your father-in-law has an alliance that could threaten the entire balance of power. The solution: beautiful women from important families were often married off as children, sent away to foreign courts, or locked away in convents not for religious reasons, but for political security. Speaking of political marriage nightmares, let's talk about Lucretia Borgia, who was beautiful, intelligent, and born into one of the most ruthlessly political families in Renaissance history. Lucretia was married 3 times before she turned 21. Not because she was unlucky in love, but because her father, Pope Alexander VI, kept using her beauty and political value as bargaining chips in his schemes for power. Her first marriage was annulled when her husband's family fell out of political favor. Her second husband was murdered, possibly on her brother's orders, when he became inconvenient to family politics. Her third marriage finally stuck, but only because she was married to someone powerful enough that killing him would start a war. Throughout all of this, Lucretia's beauty was both her curse and her weapon. It made her valuable enough to marry into power, but dangerous enough that every political shift in Italy could literally threaten her life. And the rumors, oh, the rumors about beautiful, powerful women in Renaissance Italy were wild. Lucretia was accused of everything from incest to poisoning dinner guests, mostly because people couldn't believe that a beautiful woman could be politically influential without being evil. But let's talk about what maintaining Renaissance-level beauty actually involved. Because the beauty treatments of this era make ancient Rome's lead makeup look like a spa day. First, there's the skin whitening. Renaissance beauty standards demanded pale skin as a sign of nobility, because obviously only peasants got tanned from working outside. The methods for achieving this pale perfection included applying mixtures containing mercury, lead, and arsenic. Yes, again with the heavy metal poisoning. Popular ingredients for Renaissance skincare included ground pearls mixed with mercury, lead-based ceruse. For that fashionable white complexion, belladonna. Drops in the eyes for dilated pupils. Belladonna literally means beautiful woman and is also deadly nightshade. Sulfur treatments for blemishes, leeches for bloodletting to maintain a pale, refined complexion. The hair treatments were equally horrifying. The ideal Renaissance woman had a high forehead. So many women would pluck their hairlines back to the middle of their heads. They'd also pluck their eyebrows completely and paint new ones higher up. For blonde hair, the height of Renaissance beauty women would sit in the sun for hours with their hair soaked in mixtures containing lye, sulfur, and other chemicals that would literally burn their scalp. Many women suffered permanent hair loss or scalp damage from these treatments. And just to make life extra complicated, Renaissance cities had sumptuary laws, basically legal restrictions on what you could wear based on your social class. These laws were supposedly about preventing excessive luxury, but they were really about controlling who got to display their wealth and beauty. If you were too beautiful and dressed too well, you could literally be arrested for looking above your station. The authorities would examine your clothing, jewelry, and even your hairstyle to determine if you were violating social hierarchies. Beautiful women from merchant families were particular targets because they could afford expensive clothing but weren't technically nobility. Looking too good could result in fines, public humiliation, or imprisonment. And here's where Renaissance beauty gets really dark. The connection between physical attractiveness and accusations of witchcraft. During the Renaissance witch trials, being too beautiful was actually considered evidence of supernatural evil. The logic: only a woman in league with the devil could maintain such perfect beauty, especially as she aged. Beautiful women who aged well were automatically suspect. Beautiful women who had any kind of unusual knowledge, herbalism, midwifery, even just being able to read, were doubly suspect. And beautiful women who dared to be confident about their appearance, they might as well have signed their own death warrants. The witch trial records are full of testimonies describing accused women as unnaturally beautiful or too fair for her age. Beauty became evidence of evil, and the punishment was torture, exile, or death. This is getting pretty dark, isn't it? Let me know in the comments if you're starting to appreciate your ability to walk around looking however you want without risking imprisonment or death. Because we're not even close to done with this historical nightmare tour. Up next, we're heading to medieval Europe, where being beautiful could literally get you accused of seducing the devil himself. Alright, time to travel back a few centuries to medieval Europe, where Christianity ruled everything and beauty was basically considered a direct line to Satan himself. If you thought the Renaissance was rough on beautiful people, medieval times were like playing life on expert mode with a target painted on your forehead. Picture this: you're a young woman in medieval England, around 1200 CE. You wake up in a world where the church controls every aspect of daily life, where being too interested in your appearance is considered vanity, deadly sin, and where beauty itself is viewed as a temptation sent by the devil to corrupt good Christian souls. Oh, and you're gorgeous. Absolutely, undeniably, stop traffic, beautiful. Congratulations, you're now a walking theological crisis. Here's the medieval catch-22 that would drive you absolutely insane. God made you beautiful, but caring about that beauty is sinful. You're supposed to be grateful for God's gifts, but not too grateful, because that would be pride. You should maintain your appearance because your body is a temple, but not too much, because that would be vanity. And if men find you attractive, well, that's obviously your fault for being a temptress, regardless of whether you did anything to encourage their attention. The medieval church had this fascinating ability to simultaneously celebrate beauty as a reflection of divine perfection and condemn it as a source of moral corruption. It's like being told to be proud of your A report card while being punished for studying too hard. Your morning routine in medieval times would make modern minimalists weep with joy, not because it's simple, but because you literally can't do anything to enhance your natural beauty without risking your immortal soul. Washing, well, that depends. Too much bathing is considered suspicious because it suggests vanity and possibly sexual immorality. Not enough bathing is considered slovenly and disrespectful to God. You have to find the perfect middle ground of cleanliness that suggests spiritual purity without indicating worldly pride. Makeup, absolutely forbidden. According to church doctrine, God made you exactly as you should be. And any attempt to improve on divine craftsmanship is basically telling the Almighty that He did a mediocre job. The punishment for wearing cosmetics could range from public shaming to excommunication. Hair, this is where it gets really complicated. Your hair should be covered in public because it's considered too sexually tempting for men to see. But you should also keep it clean and well maintained as a sign of respect for God's creation. However, spending too much time on your hair is vanity, and cutting it short is masculine and therefore sinful. Are you sensing a pattern here? Clothing, you're supposed to dress modestly to avoid tempting men, but you also can't dress so plainly that you appear to be rejecting God's blessings of material comfort. Every single clothing choice becomes a moral calculation. Now, here's where medieval beauty becomes truly cursed. Marriage politics combined with religious doctrine. As a beautiful medieval woman, you're valuable marriage property, but marriage itself is considered spiritually inferior to chastity. The church teaches that virginity is the highest state of feminine virtue, but society demands that you marry to create alliances and produce heirs. Your beauty makes you a prize in the marriage market, which means you have zero control over your own fate. But it also makes you dangerous, because beautiful women are considered more likely to commit adultery, seduce other women's husbands, and generally cause moral chaos. The solution: many beautiful women were literally locked away in convents, not because they had religious callings, but because their families couldn't risk the political and social complications of their attractiveness. The courtly love nightmare. And just to make things extra complicated, medieval Europe also invented courtly love, the idea that noble knights should devote themselves to beautiful, unattainable women from a distance, writing poetry about their perfection and performing heroic deeds in their honor. Sounds romantic, right? Wrong. Courtly love put beautiful women on pedestals so high that they stopped being human beings and became symbols. You weren't a person with thoughts, feelings, and desires. You were an ideal, a muse, a prize to be won through feats of valor. Knights would literally fight wars over the right to dedicate their service to your beauty. Men would compose epic poems about your eyebrows without ever actually speaking to you. Your face would be painted on shields and banners, carried into battle as a symbol of everything worth fighting for. And you got to sit in a tower somewhere, looking beautiful and being grateful that men considered you worthy of their obsession. The pressure to live up to these impossible ideals of feminine perfection was crushing. You had to be beautiful but not vain, pure but not frigid, inspiring but not seductive, gracious but not proud. One wrong move, and you'd go from beloved ideal to dangerous temptress overnight. The Eleanor of Aquitaine example. Let's talk about Eleanor of Aquitaine. one of the most beautiful and powerful women of the medieval period, who basically lived through every curse of medieval beauty and somehow survived to tell the tale. Eleanor was not only gorgeous, but also incredibly wealthy, intelligent, and politically savvy. She was married first to the King of France, then to the King of England, making her one of the most powerful women in medieval Europe. Her beauty and intelligence made her a political force, but it also made her dangerous. When she supported her sons in their rebellion against their father, King Henry II of England, she was imprisoned for 16 years, not for any specific crime, but because a beautiful, intelligent, wealthy woman with political opinions was considered too dangerous to be allowed freedom. The official justification for her imprisonment kept changing. Sometimes she was too rebellious, sometimes too influential, sometimes too beautiful to be trusted around other men. The real reason: she had used her attractiveness and intelligence to build political power, and that combination was considered threatening to the entire medieval social order. The witch trial precursors, medieval Europe, also laid the groundwork for the witch trials that would explode during the Renaissance. And guess what? One of the early warning signs of potential witchcraft was unusual beauty, especially in older women. The logic went like this: only supernatural forces could allow a woman to maintain her attractiveness past what was considered the normal age of decline. Beautiful older women were automatically suspect because their continued attractiveness suggested they had made deals with demonic forces. Women who used herbs for skincare were practicing unnatural arts. Women who knew how to prevent pregnancy were interfering with God's will. Women who understood midwifery were dangerously close to magic. And if you were beautiful while doing any of these things, well, obviously you were using your appearance to seduce men into sin and corruption. The medical horror show. Medieval medicine's approach to beauty was simultaneously hilarious and terrifying. The dominant medical theory was that your appearance reflected your spiritual state, so being beautiful meant you were probably holy. But caring too much about being beautiful meant you were definitely sinful. Treatment for excessive beauty that might lead to sinful pride included bloodletting to reduce the hot humors that caused attractive coloring, fasting to reduce the fullness of figure that might tempt men, wearing hair shirts to mortify the flesh and reduce worldly vanity, cold baths to reduce the warmth associated with sexual attractiveness, and if you were beautiful but not living a sufficiently holy life, the recommended treatment was basically to make yourself less attractive through deliberate neglect of your appearance, because clearly your beauty was leading you astray. The religious double bind, perhaps the most psychologically damaging aspect of medieval beauty standards, was the religious double bind that made it literally impossible to be both beautiful and virtuous according to church teaching. If you were naturally beautiful, that was God's gift and you should be grateful. But gratitude for your beauty was pride, which was sinful. If you tried to downplay your beauty, that was rejecting God's gifts, which was also sinful. If you accepted compliments on your beauty, that was vanity. If you rejected compliments, that was false modesty, which was a form of pride. Beautiful women were told they had a special responsibility to remain pure because their attractiveness made them more tempting to men. But they were also told that if men were tempted by them, it was their fault for being tempting. The only socially acceptable response to being beautiful was to hide away in a convent. Remove yourself from society entirely, and spend your life praying for forgiveness for the sin of having been made attractive. Engagement check-in. I need to pause here and ask, are you starting to feel grateful for living in an era where you can wear makeup without risking excommunication? Because honestly, researching this stuff has made me appreciate every single modern beauty freedom we have. even the problematic ones. Drop a comment and let me know, what medieval beauty restriction would you find hardest to live with? The no makeup rule, the hair covering requirement, or the general expectation that caring about your appearance means you're probably going to hell? Because we're about to jump forward to a time period that somehow made things even worse. The Victorian era, where beauty standards were so restrictive and dangerous that they literally reshaped women's bodies, sometimes permanently. Welcome to Victorian England, where beauty standards were so intense they could literally kill you, and where being naturally gorgeous just meant you had to work twice as hard to meet society's increasingly impossible expectations. It's 1850, and you're a young woman from a respectable family in London. You wake up each morning knowing that your entire social value, marriage prospects, and family's reputation depend on your ability to conform to a beauty ideal that requires you to be simultaneously robust and fragile, pure and alluring, natural and artificially enhanced. Oh, and you have to do all of this while wearing clothing that makes basic human functions like breathing and sitting down into Olympic-level athletic events. Your day starts at dawn, not because you're an early riser by choice, but because achieving Victorian beauty standards requires approximately 4 hours of preparation that would make modern beauty gurus quit their jobs and become accountants. First, there's the corset. And no, we're not talking about some romantic Hollywood version of a corset. We're talking about a genuine Victorian torture device made of whalebone and steel, designed to compress your waist to an ideal measurement that's about 6 inches smaller than your natural waist. Putting on a Victorian corset isn't getting dressed, it's entering into a binding contract with pain. The process requires at least one other person, preferably 2, who will pull the laces tight enough to literally reshape your ribcage. You'll hold onto something sturdy while they pull, and you'll practice the shallow breathing techniques that will become your new normal. Because deep breathing is no longer physically possible. The goal, an 18-inch waist. For reference, the average woman today has a natural waist measurement between 25 to 35 inches. Victorian women were literally trying to make their waists smaller than many women's thighs. And if you're naturally beautiful with a naturally small waist, congratulations, you now get to make it even smaller. Because the competition isn't against normal human proportions. It's against other corseted women who are also defying anatomy in pursuit of the perfect silhouette. The beauty arsenal of doom. Once you're properly compressed into your new, physically impossible shape, it's time for the rest of your beauty routine. And Victorian cosmetics make Renaissance-led makeup look like organic skincare. For that perfect pale complexion, because sun-kissed skin is for peasants, you'll apply a mixture containing arsenic, lead, and mercury. The most popular face powder, Bloom of Nennen, literally contained arsenic as its main ingredient. The marketing promised it would give you the most beautiful complexion imaginable. They just forgot to mention that it would also give you arsenic poisoning, hair loss, and eventual death. For rosy cheeks, you'll use rouge made from cinnabar mercury sulfide, which will slowly destroy your nervous system while giving you that healthy glow. For bright eyes, you'll put belladonna drops directly into your pupils, because nothing says attractive quite like voluntary blindness from nightshade poisoning. And let's talk about hair. Victorian hairstyling wasn't just complicated, was architecturally impossible. The ideal Victorian woman had hair that defied gravity, required structural engineering, and took literally hours to construct each day. Popular Victorian hairstyles required hair pieces made from other women's hair, often from dead women, because the Victorians were not squeamish about death wire frameworks to support the elaborate constructions. Pomades made from bear grease and other delightful ingredients. hairpins weighing several pounds, chemical treatments that frequently resulted in hair loss or scalp burns, the clothing catastrophe. But the real Victorian beauty curse wasn't the cosmetics or the hairstyles, was the clothing. We've talked about corsets, but that's just the beginning of your daily clothing nightmare. A fully dressed Victorian lady wore approximately 20 to 30 pounds of clothing, including chemise underwear, corset cover, bustle, a wire framework worn over the hips, drawers, stockings, petticoats, multiple layers, the actual dress, gloves, hat, boots that took 20 minutes to lace up. Moving in this outfit required careful planning. Sitting down was a complex maneuver. Going to the bathroom was basically impossible without assistance. And if you fell down, you weren't getting back up without help, because the clothing was so restrictive and heavy that basic mobility was compromised. But here's the cursed part. If you were naturally beautiful, society expected you to make this impossible beauty standard look effortless. You were supposed to glide gracefully through ballrooms, have charming conversations, and appear perfectly comfortable while literally suffocating in your own clothing. The fainting epidemic. Victorian women fainted. A lot, like constantly. Victorian literature is full of delicate heroines who swoon at the slightest provocation. And for years, people assumed this was just fashionable feminine fragility. Turns out, they were fainting because they couldn't breathe. The combination of tight corsets, heavy clothing, and toxic cosmetics meant that Victorian women were operating in a constant state of mild oxygen deprivation and slow poisoning. Fainting wasn't a romantic feminine trait. It was a predictable medical response to Victorian beauty standards. And if you were naturally beautiful, you were expected to maintain this dangerous beauty regimen while also being charming, intelligent, and socially graceful. Beautiful Victorian women had to excel at conversation, music, languages, and social etiquette, all while slowly suffocating and being poisoned by their own makeup. The marriage market horror. Victorian society turned beautiful women into literal commodities in the marriage market. If you were attractive, your entire family's social status depended on your ability to marry well, which meant attracting the most advantageous husband possible. This created a competitive environment where beautiful women were constantly being evaluated, compared, and ranked like prize livestock at a country fair. The season in Victorian London was essentially a several-month-long beauty pageant where young women were paraded in front of eligible bachelors at balls, dinner parties, and social events. Your beauty was your family's investment portfolio, and the return on that investment determined your entire future. But here's the twisted part. While your beauty was your most valuable asset, you weren't allowed to acknowledge it or use it deliberately. You had to be naturally, effortlessly gorgeous while pretending that you had no idea you were attractive. The ideal Victorian beauty was simultaneously stunning and completely unaware of her own appeal. The cult of invalidism. And then there was the Victorian obsession with female frailty. Beautiful women were expected to be not just attractive, but delicate, sickly, and in need of constant protection. This led to the cult of invalidism, where being chronically ill was actually considered fashionable and attractive. Wealthy Victorian women would deliberately cultivate pallor, weakness, and mysterious ailments because it suggested they were too refined and delicate for the harsh realities of the world. Tuberculosis, with its symptoms of pale skin, bright eyes, and gradual wasting away, was actually romanticized as a beautiful disease. Some Victorian women would take arsenic in small doses to maintain a pale, ethereal appearance, deliberately restrict their food intake to maintain a fragile, delicate figure, avoid exercise or physical activity to cultivate weakness, use opium-based medicines to create a dreamy, otherworldly demeanor. If you were naturally beautiful and healthy, you were expected to make yourself artificially fragile to meet beauty standards. Strength, vitality, and robust health were considered unfeminine and unattractive. The beauty death toll. Victorian beauty standards didn't just make women uncomfortable, they literally killed them. The combination of toxic cosmetics, restrictive clothing, and dangerous beauty practices created a genuine public health crisis that Victorian society simply accepted as the price of feminine beauty. Common causes of death related to Victorian beauty standards included arsenic poisoning from cosmetics, lead poisoning from face paint, mercury poisoning from rouge, and skin treatments, corset-related organ damage and deformity, infections from cosmetic procedures, malnutrition from restrictive eating to maintain tiny waists, accidents caused by restrictive clothing and inability to move quickly, but these deaths were rarely attributed to beauty practices. Instead, they were blamed on feminine weakness, delicate constitutions, or mysterious wasting diseases. Society preferred to believe that women were naturally fragile rather than admit that. Beauty standards were literally killing them. The linguistic prison. Victorian society even controlled how beautiful women could talk about their own appearance. There was an entire vocabulary of acceptable and unacceptable ways to discuss beauty, and using the wrong words could ruin your reputation. A beautiful woman could acknowledge compliments with phrases like, "You're too kind," or "I'm sure I don't deserve such praise." She could never say thank you directly, or, heaven forbid, agree with a compliment about her appearance. She could discuss her toilette, the process of getting dressed and groomed, but never her beauty routine. She could mention her complexion, but never admit to using cosmetics to achieve it. She could refer to her natural gifts, but never suggest that she was deliberately enhancing them. The linguistic restrictions were so complex that beautiful women essentially had to pretend they had no agency in their own appearance. They had to maintain impossible beauty standards while acting as if their attractiveness was entirely accidental and effortless. The photography paradox. The invention of photography during the Victorian era created a whole new level of beauty pressure. For the first time in history, your appearance could be permanently recorded and widely distributed. Victorian portrait photography required sitting perfectly still for several minutes while maintaining an attractive expression. The long exposure times meant that any movement would blur the image. So you had to be not only beautiful, but capable of maintaining that beauty without moving for extended periods. And since photographs were expensive and meant to last forever, there was enormous pressure to look absolutely perfect. A bad photograph could damage your reputation and marriage prospects for years to come. The class consciousness curse. If you were naturally beautiful but from a lower social class, Victorian society created a special kind of hell for you. Your attractiveness might catch the attention of upper-class men, but it also made you a target for moral condemnation. Beautiful working-class women were automatically suspected of using their looks for immoral purposes. If you were a servant, seamstress, or shop girl who was too attractive, you were assumed to be supplementing your income through prostitution or seeking to seduce your social betters. The Victorian concept of appropriate beauty was deeply tied to social class. Upper-class women were expected to be pale, delicate, and refined. Working-class women who achieved this look were accused of putting on airs or trying to rise above their station. But working-class women who embraced more robust, healthy beauty were dismissed as coarse and unfeminine. There was literally no way for a beautiful working-class woman to exist without being morally condemned by someone. The literary beauty trap. Victorian literature created impossible beauty ideals that real women were expected to emulate. The heroines of popular novels were always breathtakingly beautiful, naturally good, and completely unaware of their own attractiveness. Real beautiful women were constantly compared to fictional characters and found wanting. You weren't just competing with other real women, you were competing with imaginary perfect women, created by male authors who had never experienced the reality of Victorian beauty maintenance. And if you were too beautiful, you risked being categorized as a dangerous woman, like the femme fatales in Gothic novels. Victorian society loved to read about dangerously attractive women, but it was terrified of them in real life. Engagement, moment, okay. I need to take a breath here because researching Victorian beauty standards has left me genuinely grateful for literally every modern convenience we have. Air conditioning, comfortable clothing, non-toxic makeup, the ability to breathe deeply. These are not small things. Drop me a comment. What Victorian beauty standard sounds the most horrifying to you? The arsenic makeup, the 18-inch waist requirement, or the expectation that you should look effortlessly perfect while slowly suffocating in 30 pounds of clothing? Because believe it or not, we're about to time jump to an era that somehow made things even more complicated. The early 20th century, where 2 world wars completely upended beauty standards, and being beautiful became a matter of national security. Time jump to 1914. The world is about to explode into the first truly global war. And you're a beautiful woman, navigating a world where your appearance is no longer just about personal attraction or social status. It's potentially about international espionage, national loyalty, and survival. Welcome to the era where being beautiful didn't just make you personally vulnerable, made you a potential threat to national security. World War I and World War II created a completely new category of beautiful woman, the suspected spy. Intelligence agencies on all sides quickly realized that attractive women could gather information, influence decisions, and manipulate powerful men in ways that traditional espionage couldn't match. The result? Every beautiful woman, especially foreign-born beautiful women, became potential suspects in a global game of espionage and counter-espionage. Picture this: you're a stunning woman in London, 1917. Maybe you're British, maybe you're not. Tit doesn't matter. What matters is that you're attractive enough to catch attention. And in a world where information can win or lose wars, your face has become a potential weapon. You can't go to a party without someone wondering if you're trying to seduce secrets out of military officers. You can't be friendly to men in uniform without risking accusations of espionage. You can't even be foreign and beautiful without automatically being suspected of working for enemy intelligence. The Mata Hari effect. Let's talk about Mata Hari. The woman who basically created the archetype of the beautiful female spy and doomed every attractive woman who came after her to a lifetime of suspicion. Mata Hari wasn't actually a spy. She was a Dutch exotic dancer named Marguerite the Geertruida Zel, who reinvented herself as an Indonesian princess and became one of the most famous performers in Europe. She was beautiful, exotic, sexually confident, and completely uninterested in politics. But during World War I, French authorities needed a scapegoat for their military failures. And Mata Hari, foreign, beautiful, and sexually independent, was the perfect target. The evidence against her was essentially non-existent. Her crime was being too beautiful, too foreign, and too comfortable with her own sexuality during a time when all 3 of those things were considered inherently suspicious. She was executed by firing squad in 1917, and her death created a template that would haunt beautiful women for decades. The idea that female beauty and foreign origins automatically equaled potential treason. The rationing beauty crisis. But even if you managed to avoid espionage accusations, wartime created entirely new beauty challenges. During both World Wars, everything used for cosmetics and beauty products was rationed or redirected to the war effort. Lipstick, the metal cases were needed for ammunition. Rouge, the pigments were needed for military equipment. Silk stockings, silk was needed for parachutes. Even bobby pins were rationed because the metal was needed for weapons. If you were beautiful, you were expected to maintain your appearance for morale purposes, because attractive women were considered essential for keeping soldiers. Spirits up, but you had to do it with essentially no resources. Wartime beauty improvisation included drawing stocking seams on bare legs, with eyebrow pencil, using beet juice as rouge and lip stain, making mascara from burnt cork and petroleum jelly, using gravy browning as leg makeup to simulate stockings, creating lipstick from petroleum jelly and crushed berries. And if you were too successful at maintaining your beauty during wartime, you risked accusations of black market dealing, vanity during national crisis, or again potential espionage. The factory girl dilemma. During both World Wars, beautiful women were expected to contribute to the war effort by working in factories. But factory work and beauty maintenance were essentially incompatible. You're expected to look attractive to maintain morale, but you're also expected to work 12-hour shifts in munitions factories, where chemical exposure ruins your skin and hair safety regulations require covering your hair. Completely factory conditions make regular beauty routines impossible. The work is so physically demanding that maintaining glamour becomes a secondary concern, but beautiful women who stopped working to focus on their appearance were accused of vanity and lack of patriotism. Beautiful women who let their appearance slide while doing war work were accused of letting down national morale. It was literally impossible to win. The Resistance Beauty Code. In occupied territories during World War II, beauty became a form of resistance and, therefore, incredibly dangerous. French women during the Nazi occupation used red lipstick as a symbol of defiance. Because the Nazis associated bright red lips with decadent Allied culture, simply wearing red lipstick became an act of political rebellion that could result in arrest or worse. Beautiful women in the resistance used their appearance as camouflage. They could move through checkpoints and gather information because soldiers were less likely to suspect attractive women of serious political activity. But this also meant that every beautiful woman in occupied territory was potentially suspect to both sides. The resistance might recruit you because of your appearance, but the occupying forces might arrest you for the same reason. The Hollywood propaganda machine. Meanwhile, in the United States, beautiful women in Hollywood found themselves conscripted into a propaganda war whether they wanted to participate or not. Actresses were expected to sell war bonds, visit wounded soldiers, and maintain perfect glamour to represent American ideals. But they were also scrutinized for their political loyalties, personal relationships, and potential foreign connections. Being a beautiful actress during wartime meant your every public appearance was analyzed for political messaging. Your clothing choices, your companions, even your facial expressions in photographs were interpreted as statements about your loyalty to the war effort. And if you were foreign-born and beautiful, the suspicion was even more intense. Actresses like Hedy Lamarr, despite her significant contributions to the war effort, she actually invented frequency hopping technology that helped develop Wi-Fi, were constantly viewed with suspicion because of their European origins and striking appearance. The liberation aftermath, the end of World War II, created a new category of beautiful woman, the suspected collaborator. In newly liberated territories, Beautiful women who had maintained their appearance during occupation were automatically suspected of collaboration with enemy forces. The logic was that only women who had collaborated with occupying soldiers could have maintained access to cosmetics, nice clothing, and beauty treatments during wartime. Thousands of women had their heads shaved in public as punishment for alleged collaboration. And many of these women were targeted not because of any evidence of actual collaboration, but because they had remained beautiful during impossible circumstances. The Cold War paranoia. The Cold War extended wartime paranoia about beautiful foreign women into peacetime. Any attractive woman from Eastern Europe, Russia, or other communist countries was automatically suspected of being a spy. The stereotype of the beautiful Soviet spy became so pervasive that real women from these countries found it almost impossible to live normal lives in Western countries. Their beauty, combined with their accents and origins, made them automatic suspects in a cultural war where attractiveness was weaponized by both sides. The psychological warfare. What made wartime beauty particularly cursed was the way it turned women's natural advantages into psychological weapons against themselves. Beautiful women were told their appearance was essential for national morale, then suspected of treason if they were too successful at maintaining it. They were expected to sacrifice for the war effort, then criticized if their sacrifices affected their appearance. They were recruited for intelligence work because of their looks, then condemned for the same looks when intelligence operations went wrong. The message was clear: your beauty is valuable to your country, but it also makes you inherently dangerous and untrustworthy. The technology trap. The development of better photography and film during this era meant that beautiful women's appearances were recorded and distributed more widely than ever before. But wartime censorship and propaganda meant that these images were often used for purposes the women never consented to. Photographs of beautiful women were used in propaganda, recruitment materials, and morale-boosting campaigns without their permission. Their faces became symbols of what soldiers were fighting for, which sounds romantic until you realize it made them targets for enemy forces and put their safety at risk. Engagement break. This is getting intense, right? We've moved from personal beauty curses to international security threats, and honestly, it's making me realize how complicated the relationship between appearance and power really is. Quick question for the comments. Do you think beautiful women today face similar pressures to represent their countries or cultures, just in different ways? Social media, international competitions, diplomatic events, has the game really changed that much? Because we're about to jump into the modern era, where social media has created beauty standards and pressures that make everything we've discussed so far look almost quaint by comparison. Welcome to the 21st century, where being beautiful has been gamified, monetized, and turned into a 24/7 performance that would make Victorian society look relaxed by comparison. It's 2025, and you wake up naturally gorgeous in a world where your face isn't just your face, it's content. It's a brand, it's a potential source of income, and it's being constantly judged by millions of strangers who have opinions about everything from your eyelash length to your moral character. Congratulations, you're living in the most documented, analyzed, and critiqued era of beauty in human history. And, unlike every other period we've discussed, there's no escape, no privacy, and no time off from the performance. Your day doesn't start when you wake up, it starts when you pick up your phone and check how your face performed overnight while you were sleeping. That selfie you posted yesterday, it got 50,000 likes, 500 comments, and was screenshotted by beauty bloggers, meme accounts, and at least 3 different Rate This Person forums. Your beauty is being discussed by people you'll never meet, in languages you don't speak, in contexts you never intended. The comments range from worship to criticism to outright harassment. Oh my God, goals. Drop your skincare routine. Fake. Nobody looks like this naturally. She's pretty, but her nose is weird. Photoshop much. I wish I looked like her. She's not even that pretty. I don't get the hype. Each comment is a tiny judgment on your genetic lottery win, and they never stop coming. Your beauty is being analyzed, critiqued, and dissected by strangers 24 hours a day. The pressure cooker of perfection. But here's where modern beauty becomes truly cursed. You're not just competing with other real people anymore. You're competing with digitally enhanced versions of yourself and everyone else. Every photo you see has been through filters, editing apps, and digital enhancement. Every natural beauty you admire has been color-corrected, smoothed, and perfected by technology. You're trying to live up to beauty standards that literally don't exist in reality. And if you're naturally beautiful, the pressure is even more intense, because people expect you to look perfect without enhancement. Any sign of digital editing, any use of filters, any acknowledgement that you might use makeup or skincare products is seen as fraud or false advertising. You're expected to be naturally flawless in a world where nothing is actually natural anymore. The monetization trap. Your beauty isn't just your personal attribute anymore, it's a potential business empire. And if you're not monetizing your appearance, you're considered naive or wasteful. Beauty influencers make millions of dollars from their faces. Cosmetic companies offer sponsorship deals. Fashion brands want to dress you. Skincare companies want to study your routine. Your face has become a commodity with market value, and everyone has opinions about how you should be managing your beauty portfolio. But monetizing your beauty comes with strings attached. You have to maintain certain beauty standards to keep sponsorship deals. Your personal life becomes marketing material. Every product you use, every procedure you get, every beauty choice you make becomes content. You're contractually obligated to look perfect in public. Your beauty routines, skincare secrets, and even your genetics become proprietary information. You can't just be beautiful anymore. You have to be beautiful in a way that sells products, generates content, and maintains brand partnerships. The documentation nightmare. Every moment of your life is potentially being recorded and shared. Paparazzi photos, fan encounters, security cameras, social media posts. Your appearance is being documented constantly from every angle, in every lighting condition, at every time of day. Those candid photos of celebrities looking less than perfect, they're actually revealing the impossible standard that beautiful people You're expected to look perfect, not just in posed photos, but in secretly taken pictures, surveillance footage, and random social media posts by strangers. The pressure to be camera ready at all times means that naturally beautiful people can never really relax or have private moments. Your face is always potentially being broadcast to millions of people who will judge every detail. The body dysmorphia epidemic. Social media has created beauty standards that are literally impossible to achieve naturally, but which look normal because everyone is digitally enhancing their appearance. This has created an epidemic of body dysmorphia that affects even naturally beautiful people. When you're comparing yourself to digitally perfected versions of other people, even genetic advantages start to feel inadequate. Beautiful people are getting cosmetic procedures to look more like filtered versions of themselves. The most cursed part. Many naturally beautiful people are using surgery and procedures to achieve looks that are actually less attractive than their natural features, because they're trying to match digital beauty standards rather than human ones. The backlash culture. Modern beauty culture has created a paradox where being too beautiful makes you a target for backlash and criticism. If you're naturally gorgeous, people assume you've had work done. If you admit to cosmetic procedures, you're criticized for being fake. If you deny having work done, you're accused of lying. Beautiful people are expected to be humble about their appearance, while also leveraging it for success. They're supposed to be relatable, while looking unattainably perfect. They're expected to promote self-acceptance, while maintaining impossible beauty standards. The result is a culture where naturally beautiful people often downplay their advantages, deny their genetic gifts, and apologize for looking the way they do. The privacy extinction. Unlike previous eras, where beautiful people could have private lives, modern technology has made privacy essentially impossible for anyone with a recognizable face. Facial recognition technology means you can be identified in any photo posted online. Geolocation data reveals where you are at any time. Social media analytics track your online behavior and preferences. Your beauty makes you recognizable, and being recognizable means you can never truly be anonymous. Beautiful people today live in a state of constant visibility that would have been unimaginable to previous generations. Every public appearance is documented. Every social interaction is potentially content. Every moment is subject to public scrutiny. The mental health crisis. The psychological pressure of modern beauty standards has created a mental health crisis among naturally beautiful people. That's rarely discussed because society assumes that being attractive should make you happy. Beautiful people are experiencing anxiety about maintaining their appearance as they age, depression from constant public scrutiny, eating disorders from pressure to maintain perfect bodies, social isolation because people make assumptions about their personalities, relationship difficulties because their partners are insecure or opportunistic, career limitations because they're not taken seriously in professional settings. The irony is that in an era where beauty is more valued and more visible than ever, being beautiful has become more psychologically damaging than in previous historical periods. The authenticity paradox. Modern social media demands both perfection and authenticity, which is psychologically impossible to maintain. Beautiful people are expected to look flawless while being real, to be aspirational while being relatable, to be confident while being humble. The pressure to be authentic means you're expected to share personal struggles, insecurities, and vulnerabilities while maintaining a perfect image. Your beauty becomes a brand that requires constant management and performance. And if you're too perfect, you're accused of being fake. If you show flaws, you're criticized for not trying hard enough. There's literally no way to exist as a beautiful person on social media without facing criticism for how you manage your image. The comparison trap. Social media has created a global beauty competition where everyone is competing with everyone else simultaneously. You're not just comparing yourself to people in your community or social circle, you're comparing yourself to the most beautiful people in the world, all day, every day. This has created beauty standards that are statistically impossible for most people to achieve, but which feel normal because they're constantly visible on social media. Even naturally beautiful people feel inadequate when comparing themselves to the highlight reels of thousands of other beautiful people. The age acceleration. Modern beauty culture has accelerated the aging anxiety that beautiful people experience. Instead of worrying about looking older than your peers, you're worrying about looking older than your filtered, edited, surgically enhanced online persona. Beautiful people are getting preventative cosmetic procedures in their 20s to maintain an appearance that they never actually had naturally. They're trying to preserve a digitally enhanced version of themselves rather than their actual natural beauty. Engagement moment. I have to pause here because this research has genuinely changed how I think about social media and beauty standards. We're living through what might be the most psychologically damaging era for beautiful people in human history, and we're calling it progress. Comment below. Do you think social media has made beauty more democratic, everyone can participate, or more oppressive, impossible standards for everyone? Because I'm honestly not sure anymore. But we're not done yet. Let's talk about what all of this historical analysis actually means for us today, and why understanding the curse of beauty throughout history might be the key to breaking free from it. So here we are. We've traveled through thousands of years of human history, and the pattern is unmistakable. In every era, in every culture, being beautiful has come with costs that society rarely acknowledges and almost never addresses. But here's the thing that's been building throughout this entire journey. Understanding the curse might be the first step to breaking it. The universal pattern. Every historical period we've examined has followed the same basic pattern. 1. Society creates impossible beauty standards. 2. Beautiful people are both worshipped and punished for meeting those standards. 3. Beauty becomes a tool of control, manipulation, and oppression. For the psychological and physical costs are ignored or blamed on the beautiful people themselves. 5. The cycle continues into the next generation, from ancient Rome to modern Instagram. The game hasn't really changed, just the technology and the specific methods of control. The hidden costs we never talk about. Throughout history, the real costs of being beautiful have been systematically hidden or ignored. Physical health. Every era has demanded beauty practices that damage health, corsets that deform organs. Modern cosmetic procedures. The pursuit of beauty has always required sacrificing physical well-being. Mental health. The psychological pressure of constant scrutiny, impossible standards, and societal expectations has created mental health crises in every generation. Economic exploitation. Beautiful people have always been economically exploited. From Roman slaves to modern influencers who create billions in value while receiving a fraction of the profits. Social isolation. Beauty creates isolation from jealousy, assumptions about personality, unwanted attention, and the inability to form genuine relationships when your appearance overshadows everything else about you. Loss of agency. Beautiful people have historically been treated as objects rather than individuals, valued for their appearance rather than their thoughts, feelings, or capabilities. The mythology versus reality. Society has created powerful mythologies about beauty that contradict historical reality. Myth. Beauty equals power and privilege. Reality. Beauty often equals vulnerability and exploitation. Myth. Beautiful people have life easier. Reality. Beautiful people face unique challenges that are rarely acknowledged or addressed. Myth. Beauty is always an advantage. Reality. Beauty often limits opportunities, especially professional ones, because people make assumptions about intelligence and capability. Myth. Beautiful people should be grateful for their appearance. Reality. Being grateful for something that makes you a target for harassment, exploitation, and unrealistic expectations is psychologically damaging. The modern digital amplification. What makes our current era uniquely challenging is that digital technology has amplified every historical beauty curse. The documentation is more extensive than ever. The audience for judgment is global rather than local. The beauty standards are more impossible because they're digitally created. The economic pressure is more intense because beauty can be monetized. Instantly, the mental health impacts are more severe because the pressure is constant and inescapable. We've taken thousands of years of beauty-related oppression and concentrated it into a 24/7 digital performance that never ends. The breakthrough moment. But here's where our historical journey becomes genuinely hopeful. For the first time in human history, we have the tools to understand and potentially break the beauty curse. We have psychological research that explains the mental health impacts, historical perspective that shows the patterns across cultures and time periods, digital platforms that can spread awareness and create community, economic independence that can reduce exploitation, medical knowledge that can prevent the physical damage of beauty practices. Most importantly, we have the ability to see the pattern clearly and make conscious choices about whether to perpetuate it. The path forward. Breaking the beauty curse isn't about rejecting beauty or pretending appearance doesn't matter. It's about 1. Recognizing the pattern, understanding that the pressure, exploitation, and impossible standards aren't natural or inevitable. They're historical patterns that can be changed. Kedua, redefining value, moving from appearance-based value to human-based value. Treating beautiful people as complete human beings rather than objects or symbols. 3. Questioning standards, asking who benefits from impossible beauty standards and why we continue to participate in systems that harm people. 4. Creating support, building communities and support systems for people dealing with beauty-related pressure and exploitation. 5. Demanding change, using our historical understanding to demand better from beauty industries, social media platforms, and cultural institutions. The individual level. For individuals dealing with beauty-related challenges today, if you're naturally beautiful, your struggles are real and valid. Society's failure to acknowledge the costs of beauty doesn't mean those costs don't exist. You deserve support, understanding, and the right to be valued for more than your appearance. If you're pursuing beauty, understanding the historical costs can help you make informed decisions about which standards are worth pursuing and which ones are genuinely harmful. If you're creating beauty content, you have the power to break historical patterns by promoting realistic standards, acknowledging the costs of beauty maintenance, and treating beautiful people as complete human beings. The societal level. At a cultural level, breaking the beauty curse requires education, teaching the real history of beauty standards and their costs, not just the mythology of beauty as pure advantage. Regulation, protecting people from predatory beauty industries, false advertising, and exploitative practices. Representation, showing the full humanity of beautiful people in media, not just their appearance. Support systems, creating mental health resources, legal protections, and community support for people dealing with beauty-related challenges. The economic dimension. The beauty industry profits from perpetuating the curse. Breaking it requires transparency, demanding honest advertising about beauty products and procedures. Fair compensation, ensuring that people who create value through their appearance receive fair compensation rather than being exploited. Alternative models, supporting businesses and platforms that prioritize human well-being over appearance-based profit. The technology solution. Digital platforms have amplified the beauty curse, but they could also help solve it. Algorithm changes. Platforms could promote diverse content rather than just conventionally attractive content. Reality checks. Technology could help distinguish between natural and enhanced images, giving users context about what they're seeing. Mental health integration. Social media platforms could integrate mental health resources and warnings about beauty-related content. Community building. Technology could be used to build support communities rather than just comparison and competition spaces. The historical lesson, the most important lesson from our journey through history, is this: the beauty curse isn't natural, inevitable, or unchangeable. It's a human creation, which means humans can modify or eliminate it. Every generation has the opportunity to do better than the previous one. We can be the generation that finally acknowledges the real costs of beauty standards and creates systems that support human well-being rather than exploit it. The call to action. So what can you actually do with this information? Personally, question beauty standards and their origins. Support beautiful people as complete human beings. Make conscious choices about beauty practices based on real information. Rather than cultural pressure, seek help if you're struggling with beauty-related mental health issues. Culturally, share this information and start conversations about the real costs of beauty standards. Support creators and businesses that promote healthy approaches to beauty. Demand better from beauty industries and social media platforms. Educate others about the historical patterns we've discussed politically. Support legislation that protects people from beauty-related exploitation. Advocate for mental health resources and education. Push for truth in advertising standards for beauty products and procedures. The ultimate recognition. Here's what I want you to take away from this entire historical journey. Beauty is not a curse because of anything inherent to being attractive. Beauty becomes a curse because of how society chooses to treat beautiful people. That's the key insight. It's not beauty itself that's the problem, it's the systems, standards, and cultural practices that have grown up around beauty throughout history. And if those systems are human creations, they can be human solutions. Final engagement. We've covered thousands of years and dozens of cultures, and honestly, my perspective on beauty, social media, and modern life has been completely changed by this research. So here's my final question for you. After learning about the historical pattern of beauty as a curse, how do you want to participate in breaking that pattern? Will you be part of the generation that finally acknowledges the real costs and works to create something better? Or will you continue the cycle that has harmed beautiful people throughout history? The choice is yours. The pattern is clear. The tools for change are available. What are you going to do with that power? Conclusion. Before you click away and go back to scrolling through perfectly curated social media feeds, I want you to remember something. Every person you see online, every beautiful face you admire or envy, every influencer whose life looks perfect, they're all operating within the same historical pattern we've discussed tonight. They're dealing with the same pressures, exploitation, and impossible standards that have plagued beautiful people for thousands of years. The technology has changed, but the fundamental challenges haven't. Your likes, comments, and engagement are part of this system. Your beauty standards, comparison habits, and assumptions about beautiful people are part of this pattern. You have the power to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. If this video changed how you think about beauty, share it. If you learned something new about history, talk about it. If you recognized patterns in your own life or the lives of people you know, take action to break those patterns. Beauty doesn't have to be a curse, but it will continue to be one as long as we pretend the costs don't exist and the patterns aren't real. The choice is yours. Make it count. Thanks for joining me on this journey through history. Like this video if it changed your perspective. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into the hidden truths of human experience. And let me know in the comments, what historical beauty curse surprised you the most? Until next time, remember, you are more than your appearance, and everyone else is too. But wait, before we wrap this up, we need to talk about one of the most notorious examples of beauty as a political weapon in human history. The court of Versailles under Louis XIV, 15 and 16. Because if you think Instagram drama is intense, you clearly haven't studied French court politics. Picture this, it's 1680, and you're a stunningly beautiful young woman who's just been presented at the court of Versailles. You think you're about to live out every fairy tale fantasy you've ever had. Gold-encrusted everything, elaborate gowns, dancing until dawn, and the most powerful people in Europe fighting for your attention. You have no idea you've just walked into the most sophisticated, deadly, and psychologically brutal beauty competition in human history. Versailles wasn't just a palace, it was a machine designed to turn beauty into political control. Louis XIV deliberately created a system where the most attractive and charming people in France would compete for his attention, because people competing with each other weren't plotting against him. Your beauty at Versailles wasn't just about personal attractiveness. It was about survival in a court where the wrong outfit choice could end your family's political influence, and the right smile could secure a fortune. The daily routine at Versailles was designed to maximize both beauty, competition, and psychological warfare. 4 a.m., wake up to begin the 3-hour process of getting dressed. And we're not talking about throwing on jeans and a t-shirt. We're talking about architectural construction projects involving corsets that required 2 servants to lace properly, wigs that weighed up to 4 pounds and required architectural engineering to stay upright, gowns with trains so long they required pages to carry them, makeup applications that took an hour and involved toxic ingredients we'll discuss shortly, jewelry worth more than most people's houses. 7 a.m. Present yourself for the morning ritual of watching the king get dressed. Yes, you read that right. At Versailles, even watching the king put on his pants was a competitive privilege that beautiful courtiers fought over. 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Spend the rest of your waking hours in constant performance, where every gesture, every word, every facial expression is being analyzed by hundreds of other courtiers who are looking for any sign of weakness, scandal, or opportunity. The Pompadour phenomenon. Let's talk about Madame de Pompadour, who basically wrote the playbook for using beauty as political power and paid the price for it in ways that would make modern influencers grateful for their relatively simple lives. Jeanne Antoinette Boyson was born into the middle class, but she was so extraordinarily beautiful and intelligent that she managed to become the official mistress of Louis XV and one of the most powerful women in Europe. Sounds like a success story, right? Wrong. Pompadour's beauty made her powerful, but it also made her the target of every political faction in France. Her enemies spread rumors that she was a spy for foreign governments because beautiful women are always suspected of espionage, a witch who had enchanted the king with supernatural powers because obviously no woman could be that influential through natural means, a prostitute who had slept her way to power because attractive women's achievements are always reduced to their sexuality, a foreign agent sent to destroy France from within. Because xenophobia and beauty suspicion go hand in hand, none of these accusations were true, but truth isn't really the point when you're dealing with beauty-based political warfare. The stress of maintaining her position, dealing with constant attacks on her reputation, and managing the political responsibilities that came with her influence literally killed her. Pompadour died at 42, exhausted by the demands of being beautiful and powerful in a system designed to destroy women who achieved both. The Marie Antoinette disaster. And then there's Marie Antoinette, whose beauty and fashion choices became symbols of everything wrong with the French monarchy, ultimately contributing to her literal execution. Marie Antoinette was Austrian, beautiful, and completely unprepared for the psychological warfare of French court politics. Her natural beauty and love of fashion were turned against her by political enemies who used her appearance as evidence of moral corruption and foreign influence. Every dress she wore was analyzed for political meaning. Every hairstyle was interpreted as a statement about her loyalty to France. Every piece of jewelry was cited as evidence of her wasteful spending of French resources. Her beauty, which should have been an asset, became evidence for her prosecution during the French Revolution. The revolutionary tribunals literally used descriptions of her clothing and appearance as proof that she was an enemy of the French people. She was executed at 37, and one of the charges against her was essentially being too beautiful and too fashionable while the country was suffering economically. The Versailles beauty standards. The beauty standards at Versailles were so extreme they make modern Instagram filters look reasonable by comparison. Courtiers were expected to maintain a level of physical perfection that required skin. Achieving the perfect pale complexion required daily applications of ceruse lead-based white paint that caused lead poisoning, rouge made from mercury compounds, beauty patches made from mouse skin or taffeta, frequent bloodletting to maintain pallor, avoiding sunlight entirely. Some courtiers didn't see natural sunlight for months. Hair. The wigs at Versailles were architectural marvels that often required human hair from multiple donors, often from corpses, wire frameworks to support elaborate constructions, pomades made from bear grease and other animal fats, powdering with starch that attracted insects, and vermin daily reconstruction that took hours. Clothing. A fully dressed Versailles courtier wore 15 to 20 pounds of clothing minimum corsets, so tight they frequently caused fainting, pannier side hoops, so wide they couldn't fit through standard doorways, trains that required servants to manage fabrics, so delicate they could only be worn once. The physical toll of maintaining Versailles beauty standards included lead poisoning from makeup, spinal deformation from heavy wigs and clothing, respiratory problems from tight corsets, skin damage from toxic cosmetics, malnutrition from eating restrictions to maintain tiny waists. The political beauty games. But the real curse of beauty at Versailles wasn't the physical demands. It was the psychological warfare disguised as social etiquette. Beautiful courtiers were constantly maneuvering for position in a system where your proximity to the royal family determined your political power. Your clothing choices were interpreted as political statements. Your friendships and rivalries affected national policy. Your beauty was a weapon that could be used against you at any moment. The most beautiful women at court were simultaneously the most powerful and the most vulnerable, because their influence depended entirely on maintaining their attractiveness and the favor of people who could withdraw that favor for any reason. The salon culture trap. Versailles also created the salon culture, where beautiful, intelligent women hosted intellectual gatherings that became centers of political and cultural influence. This sounds progressive until you realize it was another way to control dangerous women by giving them the illusion of power while keeping them under surveillance. Beautiful salon hostesses like Julie de L'Espinasse and Madame Geoffrin wielded enormous cultural influence, but they were constantly monitored by royal authorities, who saw their beauty and intelligence as potential threats to political stability. These women had to navigate impossible expectations, be intellectually brilliant but not threatening to male egos, be beautiful but not sexually available, be influential but not politically dangerous, be entertaining but not frivolous, be original but not revolutionary. One wrong move, one conversation that was interpreted as seditious, one relationship that suggested political disloyalty, and their salons would be shut down and their lives destroyed. The economic beauty trap. Versailles also created the first truly modern beauty economy, where maintaining court-appropriate appearance required enormous financial resources that trapped families in cycles of debt and dependence. A single court gown could cost the equivalent of a modern house. The annual beauty budget for a Versailles courtier included dozens of custom gowns for different occasions, wigs, hairpieces, and styling services, cosmetics and skincare treatments, jewelry and accessories, servants to maintain the wardrobe and assist with daily beauty routines. Families would bankrupt themselves to maintain their daughters' positions at court, because the alternative, losing social standing and political influence, was considered worse than financial ruin. Beautiful women became economic hostages to a system that demanded impossible beauty standards while providing no guarantee of security or success in return. The Revolution backlash. When the French Revolution finally arrived, the accumulated resentment against Versailles, beauty culture exploded into violence that specifically targeted beautiful women associated with the aristocracy. Revolutionary mobs didn't just execute aristocrats. They specifically hunted down beautiful women who had been symbols of aristocratic excess. The logic was that these women had used their beauty to exploit and oppress the French people, so their beauty itself was a form of treason. Hundreds of beautiful women were executed, not for any specific political crimes, but for having participated in a beauty culture that had come to symbolize everything wrong with the old regime. The revolution created a new beauty standard based on Republican Birthway. Women were supposed to be modest, natural, and unadorned. Using cosmetics or elaborate hairstyles was considered counter-revolutionary and could result in imprisonment or death. Beautiful women who had spent their entire lives learning to navigate the demands of Versailles suddenly found themselves targets for elimination simply because they looked like aristocrats. Now, let's travel east to the Ottoman Empire, where beauty wasn't just a personal attribute or even a political tool, it was literally imperial. Currency in a system that turned attractive women into living investments in the empire's future. Welcome to the harem system, where being beautiful enough to catch a sultan's attention was simultaneously the greatest opportunity and the most dangerous trap a woman could fall into. It's 1520, and you're a young woman in the Ottoman Empire. Maybe you're from a noble family offering daughters to secure political alliances. Maybe you're from a conquered territory, selected for your beauty as part of the tribute system. Maybe you were simply noticed by the wrong person at the wrong time. Regardless of how you got here, you're now part of the imperial harem, home to potentially thousands of women, where your beauty has made you both incredibly valuable and completely powerless. The Ottoman harem wasn't the male fantasy that Western literature often portrays. It was a complex political institution where beautiful women were sorted into a rigid hierarchy based on their appearance, intelligence, and ability to produce male heirs. At the bottom, odalisques, beautiful women, who served the upper levels of the hierarchy but had little chance of ever seeing the Sultan. Think of them as the unpaid interns of the imperial beauty system. Middle tier, favorites, women whose beauty had caught enough attention to be noticed by the Sultan, but who hadn't yet achieved the security of bearing his children. Top-tier consorts and the valid Sultan women, who had used their beauty to secure political power by producing potential heirs to the empire. Here's the cursed part. Your position in this hierarchy could change overnight based on factors completely outside your control. Age out of the Sultan's preferred demographic. Down you go. Fail to get pregnant after catching his attention. Back to the bottom. Produce a daughter instead of a son. Better luck next time. Your beauty got you into the system, but it couldn't guarantee your survival within it. A day in imperial captivity. Your daily routine in the harem would make modern beauty influencers weep with exhaustion. Dawn. Wake up for the first of many daily beauty preparations. This isn't just about looking good. Your appearance is literally your job security in a system where being replaced means disappearing forever. Morning beauty ritual, 2 to 3 hours. Full body hair removal using a mixture of arsenic, lime, and other chemicals that frequently caused chemical burns. Skin treatments involving ground pearls, gold leaf, and various toxic substances. Elaborate braiding and decoration of hair, using techniques that took years to master. Application of kohl around the eyes, using antimony-based compounds that caused eye damage. Henna applications for hands and feet that took hours to apply and set. Midday. Education and training. Beautiful harem women weren't just decorative. They were expected to be accomplished in multiple languages: Arabic, Persian, Turkish, often others, music and dance, poetry and literature, political strategy and court intrigue, sexual techniques. Yes, this was formal education. Afternoon. More beauty maintenance. Plus the psychological warfare of competing with hundreds of other beautiful women for the attention of one man who held absolute power over your life and death. Evening. Potential summons to entertain the Sultan, which could result in advancement, pregnancy, or simply another day of uncertainty about your future. The Roxolana phenomenon. Let's talk about Harem Sultan, known in the West as Roxolana, who used her extraordinary beauty and intelligence to become one of the most powerful women in Ottoman history, and whose story reveals both the potential and the curse of beauty in imperial systems. Roxolana was originally a Ukrainian woman, possibly captured during Ottoman raids and brought to the harem because of her striking red hair and exceptional beauty. In the normal course of events, she should have been one of many beautiful women competing for temporary imperial attention. Instead, she managed to become Suleiman, the Magnificent's favorite consort, convince him to marry her, breaking centuries of Ottoman tradition, secure the succession for her son, exercise significant influence over imperial policy, essentially rule the Ottoman Empire alongside Suleiman. This sounds like the ultimate beauty success story, until you consider the costs. She spent her entire adult life in a system where her security depended on maintaining the sexual and romantic interest of a man who could have her executed at any moment for any reason. She had to outmaneuver hundreds of other beautiful, intelligent women who were literally fighting for their lives. She could never leave, never have a relationship with anyone else, never make independent choices about her own life. Her beauty and intelligence made her powerful, but they also made her a prisoner in a golden cage where one wrong move could result in death for herself and her children. The beauty maintenance. Horror. The beauty standards in the Ottoman harem were designed to create a specific type of attractiveness that appealed to imperial tastes. But the methods for achieving these standards were often dangerous or permanently damaging. Skin treatments included daily baths in milk, honey, and rose water, the safe part applications of white lead for pale skin, mercury-based compounds for blemish removal, arsenic treatments for skin purification, chemical peels using acids that frequently caused permanent scarring, body modification practices included deliberate weight gain or loss to match current imperial preferences, use of belladonna to dilate pupils for a more exotic appearance, dental modifications including filing teeth or applying gold caps, scarification or tattooing for distinctive appearance in extreme cases, surgical procedures to alter facial features, hair treatments involved, chemical straightening or curling to achieve preferred textures, dyes made from toxic metals and plants, extensions using hair from deceased women, elaborate styling that required daily reconstruction, pomades and oils that attracted insects and caused scalp infections, the psychological warfare. The harem system created a form of psychological warfare among beautiful women that was more sophisticated and brutal than anything we see in modern reality TV. These women were competing not just for attention, but for survival. The stakes weren't just personal, they were generational. Your success or failure determined not just your own fate, but the fate of any children you might have. The competition included information warfare, gathering intelligence about the sultan's preferences, moods, and political concerns, alliance building, creating temporary partnerships with other women, while knowing those alliances could shift overnight, sabotage, undermining competitors through rumors, manipulation, or worse, performance optimization, constantly improving your beauty, intelligence, and entertainment value, political maneuvering, understanding imperial politics well enough to provide valuable counsel. The mental health costs were enormous. Women in the harem system frequently suffered from anxiety disorders, from constant uncertainty about their status, depression from isolation and lack of autonomy, eating disorders from pressure to maintain specific body types, paranoia from living in an environment where everyone was a potential threat, identity disorders from having their entire sense of self tied to their appearance, and imperial favor, the motherhood trap. If you managed to get pregnant by the Sultan, you might think your problems were solved. You'd be wrong. Pregnancy in the harem system created a new set of dangers. Gender uncertainty. Your child's sex determined your future status. Boys meant security. Girls meant disappointment. Succession, politics. Your son was a potential heir, which made him a target for elimination by other factions. Medical risks. Ottoman medical care for pregnant women involved treatments that were often more dangerous than the conditions they were meant to address. Political vulnerability. Pregnancy made you a more valuable target for political manipulation or elimination. If you gave birth to a son who eventually became sultan, you could become the valid sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire. But achieving that position meant navigating decades of palace intrigue, where your beauty had made you a target and your son's potential succession made you a threat to everyone else's ambitions. The aging crisis. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of the harem system was what happened to beautiful women as they aged out of imperial favor. Unlike other historical systems where beautiful women might transition to different roles or find alternative sources of security, the harem system provided no clear exit strategy. Older women in the harem faced several grim options. Service roles, becoming servants to younger, more favored women, political roles, using their experience and knowledge to become power brokers and advisors. Exile, being quietly removed from the harem with minimal support, elimination, simply disappearing when they were no longer useful. The system was designed to extract maximum value from beauty while providing minimal long-term security. Your attractiveness was treated as a resource to be consumed rather than a personal attribute to be respected. The cultural export. The Ottoman harem system influenced beauty standards and practices throughout the empire and beyond. The specific combination of luxury, sensuality, and power that characterized harem beauty became a template that spread across the Islamic world and influenced European Orientalist fantasies. But these cultural exports typically emphasize the luxury and sensuality while ignoring the psychological costs, political dangers, and human rights violations that were inherent to the system. Western literature romanticized the harem as a place of exotic beauty and sexual freedom, completely missing the reality of it as an institution that turned beautiful women into political prisoners and breeding stock for imperial dynasties. The economic structure. The harem system also created a complex economy around beauty that extended far beyond the palace walls. Beauty supply chains, networks of merchants providing cosmetics, fabrics, and luxury goods specifically for harem use. Training academies, institutions that prepared young women for potential harem service by teaching beauty, maintenance, and cultural skills. Intelligence networks, systems for identifying and acquiring beautiful women from across the empire. Support industries, craftspeople, artists, and specialists who catered to harem beauty standards. This beauty economy created dependencies that extended throughout Ottoman society, making the harem system not just a court institution, but an economic force that shaped entire regions. Let's travel back to one of history's most beauty-obsessed civilizations, ancient Egypt, where being beautiful wasn't just about human attraction, it was about your connection to the gods themselves. And if you think that sounds like it would make life easier for beautiful people, you clearly haven't been paying attention to this historical pattern. It's 1350 BCE, and you're a stunningly beautiful young woman in the court of Pharaoh Akhenaten. You wake up in a civilization that literally worships beauty as a divine attribute, where physical perfection is considered evidence of divine favor, and where the most beautiful people are thought to be closer to the gods than ordinary mortals. Congratulations, you're now a living religious symbol in a culture where disappointing the gods could result in the destruction of the entire kingdom. Ancient Egyptians believed that physical beauty was a gift from the gods, specifically from Hathor, the goddess of beauty, love, and joy. This sounds like it would be great for beautiful people, until you realize that being considered divinely blessed in ancient Egypt came with religious obligations that could literally kill you. Beautiful people in ancient Egypt were expected to maintain their appearance as a form of religious devotion, serve as living representations of divine perfection, participate in religious ceremonies where their beauty was offering to the gods, accept that their appearance belonged not just to them, but to the entire community and the gods. Your beauty wasn't your personal attribute, it was a divine gift that you held in trust for the spiritual well-being of your entire civilization. The Nefertiti nightmare. Let's talk about the most famous, beautiful woman in ancient Egyptian history, Queen Nefertiti, whose name literally means the beautiful one has come. Her story reveals everything about how ancient Egyptian beauty culture could elevate and destroy the same person. Nefertiti was so beautiful that she became co-ruler of Egypt alongside her husband Akhenaten. Her face was considered so perfect that it was used as the standard for depicting divine beauty in Egyptian art. She was literally worshipped as a living goddess. But here's where the divine beauty curse kicks in. When Akhenaten's religious revolution began to fail and the traditional priesthood fought back against his monotheistic reforms, Nefertiti became a target precisely because of her divine beauty status. The logic was simple. If beautiful people were blessed by the gods, then the gods' disapproval of Akhenaten's reign should be reflected in the loss of Nefertiti's beauty or status. When that didn't happen naturally, political enemies took matters into their own hands. Nefertiti disappeared from historical records around year 14 of Akhenaten's reign. Some historians believe she was killed. Others think she was forced to assume a male identity to continue ruling. But all agree that her divine beauty, which had made her the most powerful woman in Egypt, ultimately made her too dangerous to be allowed to survive the political changes. The daily beauty rituals of spiritual duty. Ancient Egyptian beauty maintenance wasn't just personal grooming, it was religious obligation that required hours of daily ritual that would make modern beauty routines look like quick touch-ups. Morning purification ritual to 3 hours. Ritual bathing in water, mixed with natron sodium carbonate for spiritual purification. full body hair removal using bronze razors and pumice stones, application of sacred oils and perfumes as offerings to Hathor. Elaborate. Eye makeup application that served both cosmetic and spiritual protection purposes. Hairstyling or wig preparation that reflected your status in the divine hierarchy. The eye makeup obsession. Egyptians invented kohl, and they didn't just use it for aesthetics. They believed that the elaborate eye makeup served multiple purposes, protecting the eyes from sand, sun, and evil spirits, making the wearer more attractive to both humans and gods, demonstrating devotion to Horus, the god associated with the eye symbol, providing medical benefits. Some kohl formulations actually did have antimicrobial properties, but Egyptian kohl was often made with lead sulfide, galena, and other toxic compounds. Beautiful people who used heavy eye makeup daily were slowly poisoning themselves in the name of spiritual devotion. The cosmetic medical horror. Egyptian beauty practices were incredibly advanced for their time, but they were also incredibly dangerous. The Egyptians were pioneers in cosmetic chemistry, but they didn't understand toxicology. Popular Egyptian beauty treatments included skin whitening using lead-based compounds, anti-aging treatments using crocodile dung and honey, hair treatments using lead acetate for color and arsenic compounds for growth, breath freshening using mouthwashes containing ammonia, tooth whitening using abrasive compounds that stripped enamel. The most beautiful people in Egyptian society were also the most likely to suffer from lead poisoning from cosmetics, dental destruction from beauty treatments, skin damage from chemical applications, eye problems from toxic makeup, hair loss from chemical treatments. But since beauty was considered divine blessing, these health problems were often interpreted as spiritual failings rather than medical consequences. The mummification beauty standard. Here's where Egyptian beauty culture gets really dark. The obsession with preserving beauty after death through mummification. Beautiful people in ancient Egypt faced pressure to maintain their appearance, not just in life, but for eternity. The mummification process for beautiful individuals often included cosmetic procedures performed on the corpse, artificial enhancement of features that had deteriorated, preservation of beauty-related artifacts and cosmetics for the afterlife, elaborate burial preparations that focused on maintaining attractive appearance. The wealthy would spend fortunes ensuring that their beautiful family members would remain attractive in the afterlife, because beauty was considered necessary for successfully navigating the divine realm after death. This created a culture where beautiful people lived under the constant pressure of knowing that their appearance would be judged not just by the living, but by the gods in the afterlife. The Cleopatra complexity. And then there's Cleopatra VII, perhaps the most politically savvy, beautiful woman in ancient history, who managed to turn Egyptian beauty culture into international political power, and whose story shows both the potential and the ultimate futility of using beauty as a political weapon. Cleopatra was reportedly incredibly beautiful, but more importantly, she understood how to use Egyptian beauty culture to project divine authority to both Egyptian subjects and foreign rulers. Her famous appearances before Julius Caesar and Mark Antony weren't just about personal seduction, they were carefully choreographed. Demonstrations of divine beauty that was meant to suggest she had the gods' support for her political ambitions. But this strategy ultimately backfired. When Octavian, later Augustus, wanted to discredit her, he used Egyptian beauty culture against her. He portrayed her as a foreign seductress who was using supernatural beauty to corrupt Roman leaders and threaten Roman values. Her beauty, which had been her greatest political asset, became the justification for destroying her. After her death, Roman propaganda depicted her as a dangerous woman whose beauty had been a threat to the stability of the civilized world. The worker-class beauty trap. Egyptian beauty culture created unique problems for beautiful people from working-class backgrounds. If you were stunningly attractive but couldn't afford the elaborate beauty maintenance required to serve in temples or royal courts, you faced impossible choices. Accept a life of manual labor while being constantly reminded that your beauty was a wasted attempt to gain access to higher social circles through your appearance. Risking accusations of social climbing or prostitution, become a professional entertainer or courtesan, which provided access to luxury but also social stigma and danger. Beautiful working-class women often became trapped in a cycle where their appearance created opportunities that they couldn't afford to maintain properly, leading to debt, exploitation, or worse. The religious beauty competitions. Ancient Egypt held regular religious festivals, where beauty was literally worshipped through competitions and displays. These weren't light-hearted beauty contests. They were serious religious ceremonies, where the most attractive participants were considered to be channeling divine energy. Winners of these competitions received temporary status as living representatives of Hathor, access to temple privileges and luxury accommodations, social elevation and marriage opportunities, religious responsibilities and community obligations, but they also faced enormous pressure to maintain divine-level beauty standards, potential sacrifice or ritual obligations, political manipulation by religious authorities, social isolation due to their elevated status. The artistic beauty prison. Egyptian art created beauty standards that were literally impossible to achieve naturally. The idealized proportions, perfect symmetry, and flawless features depicted in Egyptian paintings and sculptures weren't just artistic conventions, they were beauty standards that real people were expected to emulate. Beautiful people in ancient Egypt were constantly measured against artistic depictions that had been idealized beyond human possibility. This created body dysmorphia among people comparing themselves to stylized art, demand for cosmetic procedures to match artistic standards, social pressure to pose and move in ways that mimicked artistic depictions, economic pressure to afford the beauty treatments needed to approach artistic ideals, the afterlife beauty anxiety. Perhaps the most psychologically damaging aspect of Egyptian beauty culture was the belief that your appearance in the afterlife would be determined by your beauty maintenance in life. This created a form of beauty anxiety that extended beyond death. Beautiful people lived in constant fear that failing to maintain their appearance would anger the gods. Aging would make them spiritually unworthy. Beauty-related sins would be punished in the afterlife. Their appearance after death would determine their eternal fate. This belief system turned beauty maintenance into a religious obligation with eternal consequences, creating psychological pressure that modern people can barely comprehend. Now let's journey to medieval Japan, where beauty became so intertwined with artistic perfection and social hierarchy that being naturally gorgeous could launch you into a world of cultural influence, or trap you in a system of aesthetic servitude that would consume your entire existence. It's 1185, and you're a beautiful young woman during the Heian period in Japan. You wake up in a culture that has elevated aesthetic refinement to a religious art form, where physical beauty is just the beginning of a complex system of cultural accomplishment that will determine your entire life path. Welcome to a society where being beautiful means you're expected to be a living work of art, 24 hours a day for the rest of your life. The Heian period created beauty standards that were so elaborate and specific that they make every other historical beauty culture look simple by comparison. Beautiful women weren't just expected to be attractive, they were expected to be master artists, poets, musicians, calligraphers, and cultural innovators, while maintaining physical perfection that required hours of daily maintenance. The ideal Heian woman was expected to excel at poetry composition, not just writing verses, but creating poems that demonstrated deep cultural knowledge and emotional sophistication. Music performance, playing multiple instruments and composing original pieces. Calligraphy, creating written characters that were considered works of art. Textile arts, designing and creating elaborate clothing that expressed personality and cultural knowledge. Incense appreciation, distinguishing between hundreds of different scent combinations. Color coordination, understanding the complex symbolic meanings of different color combinations. Cultural conversation, discussing literature, philosophy, and aesthetics with scholarly depth. And while mastering all of these cultural arts, you also had to maintain a level of physical beauty that required the Heian beauty maintenance nightmare. Hair. The ideal Heian woman had hair that reached the floor when she was standing. This wasn't just about length. It was about thickness, texture, and shine that required daily brushing sessions that took hours. Special dietary supplements and herbal treatments. Careful protection from weather, humidity, and damage. Elaborate styling that required multiple servants, regular trimming and maintenance by specialists. And if your natural hair wasn't perfect, too bad. There were no hair extensions or wigs that could achieve the ideal Heian hair standard. You either had naturally perfect hair, or you spent your entire life being considered physically inadequate. Skin. Heian beauty required skin so pale it was nearly translucent, achieved through complete avoidance of sunlight. Some Heian women didn't see direct sunlight for years. Daily applications of white powder made from rice paste and lead. Removal of all facial hair, including eyebrows, which were then painted higher on the forehead. Teeth blackening, using iron oxide and vinegar. Yes, deliberately making your teeth black was considered beautiful. Lip reduction, using cosmetics to create a tiny rosebud mouth. A properly dressed Heian woman wore 12 to 15 layers of silk robes, each one carefully selected for color combinations that expressed seasonal awareness and cultural sophistication. Fabric quality that demonstrated social status. Arrangement that created the perfect silhouette. Symbolic meaning that conveyed personality and education. Getting dressed in the morning was a 3-hour process that required multiple servants and extensive cultural knowledge. The literary beauty trap. Heian Japan created the world's first novel, The Tale of Genji, which established literary beauty standards that beautiful women were expected to emulate in real life. This wasn't just about looking like fictional characters, it was about living like them. Beautiful Heian women were expected to communicate primarily through poetry, even in casual conversation, experience emotions with the same intensity and aesthetic sophistication as literary heroines, create their own romantic narratives that were worthy of literary documentation, maintain the same level of cultural refinement as fictional characters. The pressure to live up to literary standards created a form of performative beauty where real women had to constantly act as if they were characters in aesthetic masterpieces. The court beauty competitions. The Heian court held regular competitions where beautiful women competed not just on appearance, but on cultural accomplishment. These competitions included poetry contests where participants had to compose verses on assigned topics, music competitions requiring original compositions and flawless performance, fashion displays where clothing choices were judged for cultural sophistication, incense appreciation contests, testing ability to identify rare scents, calligraphy competitions judged on artistic merit and cultural knowledge. Winning these competitions could elevate a beautiful woman's social status, but losing them could result in social exile and family shame. The pressure was so intense that some participants suffered nervous breakdowns, and there are historical records of beautiful women becoming recluses rather than risk public failure in these cultural beauty competitions. The Murasaki Shikibu phenomenon. Let's talk about Murasaki Shikibu, the author of the Tale of Genji, who was reportedly quite beautiful, and who used her combination of physical attractiveness and literary genius to achieve unprecedented cultural influence, while also demonstrating the limits of what even exceptional beauty and talent could accomplish in a system designed to control women. Murasaki was beautiful, brilliant, and from a good family, which should have been the perfect combination. She used her beauty for success to gain access to court circles, where her intelligence allowed her to create what many consider the world's first psychological novel. But even she couldn't escape the beauty curse. Her literary success was constantly attributed to her physical attractiveness rather than her intellectual abilities. Court observers assumed that men were helping her write, because surely a beautiful woman couldn't produce such sophisticated literature independently. When she gained too much influence through her writing, she was effectively marginalized by being assigned to serve Empress Chi-Chi, which provided her with security but also limited her independence and creative freedom. Her beauty opened doors, but it also meant that her intellectual achievements were always viewed through the lens of her physical appearance. She was trapped between being too attractive to be taken seriously as a scholar and too intelligent to be dismissed as merely decorative. The aesthetic prison, Heian, Japan, created what might be called the first aesthetic prison, a cultural system where beautiful people were valued for their appearance but trapped by the expectations that came with that valuation. Beautiful Heian women lived in environments that were designed to showcase their attractiveness while limiting their freedom, physical spaces. Beautiful women lived in apartments designed like stage sets, with viewing areas where their beauty could be displayed during court visits. Elaborate gardens visible from their rooms to provide appropriate scenic backgrounds. Furniture and decorations chosen to complement their personal aesthetics. Lighting designed to show their physical features to best advantage social interactions. Conversations were scripted by aesthetic expectations. Personal meetings often took place behind screens, so that beauty could be partially revealed for maximum impact. Poetry exchanges replaced casual conversation. Even private letters were expected to be artistic productions. Emotional expressions had to conform to aesthetic standards, daily routines. Every moment of life was choreographed for maximum beauty impact. Meal times were scheduled around beauty maintenance needs. Exercise was limited to activities that enhanced rather than threatened physical perfection. Sleep schedules were designed around the time needed for daily beauty preparation. Social calendar was managed to ensure appearance at peak attractiveness. The Buddhist beauty contradiction. Medieval Japan was heavily influenced by Buddhism, which taught that attachment to physical appearance was a source of suffering and spiritual ignorance. This created a fascinating contradiction for beautiful people, who were simultaneously celebrated for their appearance and told that caring about that appearance was spiritually harmful. Beautiful Buddhist women faced impossible choices: embrace their beauty and be considered spiritually shallow, reject their beauty and waste what society considered a divine gift, try to balance appreciation and detachment, which was psychologically exhausting. Many beautiful women became nuns, not necessarily from religious calling, but because it was the only socially acceptable way to escape the beauty performance requirements while maintaining social respect. The most famous example is Ramanin, a beautiful imperial consort who became a Buddhist nun after political upheavals destroyed her family. Her beauty had made her a political target, and religious life was her only path to safety and autonomy. The seasonal beauty demands. Heian aesthetic culture demanded that beautiful people adjust their appearance, clothing, and even personality traits to match seasonal changes. This wasn't just about wearing appropriate clothing. It was about embodying the aesthetic essence of different times of year. Spring beauty requirements. Clothing in colors that matched specific flowers and seasonal changes. Poetry that demonstrated awareness of seasonal emotional moods. Behavior that reflected the awakening energy of spring. Beauty treatments that enhanced features associated with renewal and growth. Summer beauty requirements. Lighter fabrics and colors that suggested coolness and relief from heat scents, and cosmetics that evoked water and breezes. Social activities that demonstrated awareness of summer's intensity. Physical deportment that suggested grace under pressure. Autumn beauty requirements. Colors and textures that matched the changing leaves. Melancholic beauty that reflected the season's emotional tone. Artistic productions that showed awareness of transience and change. Beauty presentations that emphasized sophistication and maturity. Winter beauty requirements. Layered clothing that created sculptural silhouettes. Pale beauty that harmonized with snow and ice. Indoor aesthetic activities that showed cultural refinement. Emotional reserve that matched winter's introspective energy, failing to properly embody seasonal aesthetic requirements was considered not just unfashionable, but culturally illiterate and socially unacceptable. The provincial beauty exile. Beautiful women who couldn't meet Heian court standards, or who fell out of favor, were often exiled to provincial courts, where they became living representatives of imperial aesthetic culture. This sounds like a consolation prize, but it was actually a form of cultural imprisonment. Provincial beauty exile meant being permanently separated from the cultural centers where your aesthetic education was valued, serving as a cultural teacher, an example for people who couldn't fully appreciate your accomplishments, living in less sophisticated environments while being expected to maintain imperial level beauty and cultural standards, having your beauty become a curiosity or novelty rather than a respected cultural contribution. Many exiled beautiful women suffered from depression and cultural isolation, cut off from the aesthetic communities where their beauty and accomplishments had meaning. The geisha prototype. The Heian period established the template that would eventually develop into the geisha system. Professional beautiful women who were trained in cultural arts and employed to provide aesthetic and intellectual entertainment. But the early versions of this system during the Heian period were even more restrictive than the later geisha culture, because they were tied to court service rather than independent professional activity. Beautiful women who became professional cultural entertainers during the Heian period faced complete dependence on aristocratic patronage. No legal rights or protections, responsibility for maintaining impossible beauty standards while performing complex cultural skills, social stigma despite their cultural value, economic insecurity that increased with age, the artistic documentation pressure. Heian Japan was obsessed with documenting beauty through art, poetry, and literature. Beautiful people were constantly being immortalized in various artistic forms, which sounds flattering until you realize it created pressure to live up to idealized artistic representations of yourself. Beautiful Heian women appeared in painted scrolls that were circulated among court circles, poetry collections that described their physical features in detail, literary works that used them as inspiration for fictional characters, court records that documented their cultural accomplishments, private diaries that analyzed their aesthetic impact. This constant artistic documentation meant that beautiful women could never have private moments or allow their appearance to be casual. They were always potentially being observed and recorded for artistic purposes. The cultural preservation burden, beautiful Heian. Women were considered responsible for preserving and transmitting cultural traditions to future generations. This wasn't just about maintaining their own aesthetic standards. It was about serving as living libraries of cultural knowledge. They were expected to remember and perfectly perform traditional cultural practices, train younger women in proper aesthetic behavior, preserve knowledge of historical beauty standards and cultural requirements, serve as consultants for cultural ceremonies and artistic productions, maintain personal collections of cultural artifacts and aesthetic objects. This cultural preservation responsibility meant that beautiful women could never fully retire from their aesthetic duties. They remained cultural resources for their entire lives, valued more for their knowledge and example than for their personal happiness or autonomy. The weather and beauty crisis. Japan's climate created unique challenges for maintaining Heian beauty standards. The humidity, seasonal changes, and natural disasters all threatened the elaborate beauty preparations that were central to cultural participation. Beautiful women had to prepare for humidity effects, hair and makeup that could be ruined by moisture in the air, seasonal disruptions, natural disasters that could interrupt beauty maintenance routines, weather-related illness, seasonal illnesses that could affect appearance and cultural performance, climate-appropriate modifications, adjusting beauty standards for practical weather concerns. While maintaining cultural requirements, many beautiful women became semi-reclusive during certain seasons, rather than risk appearing in public when weather conditions made it impossible to maintain proper aesthetic standards. Let's time jump to one of the darkest periods in European history for beautiful people, the Spanish Inquisition, where your physical attractiveness could literally be used as evidence that you were in league with Satan himself. It's 1480, and you're a beautiful woman in Spain during the height of the Inquisition. You wake up in a world where the Catholic Church has convinced the population that unusual beauty is, especially in women's, supernatural and therefore suspect. Your gorgeous face, which in other eras might have brought you advantages, has now made you a potential target for one of history's most systematic campaigns of religious persecution. Welcome to an era where being too beautiful wasn't just socially difficult, it was potentially fatal. The theological beauty problem. The Spanish Inquisition created a unique theological problem around beauty. If God made humans in his image, why were some people so much more beautiful than others? The answer, according to Inquisition doctrine, was that exceptional beauty was either a divine miracle, rare, or supernatural interference, much more likely. This created impossible categories for beautiful people. Divinely blessed, your beauty was a miracle from God, which meant you had special religious obligations and were expected to live as a saint. Naturally gifted, your beauty was normal human variation, but you had to prove this by living a completely ordinary, unremarkable life, supernaturally enhanced. Your beauty came from demonic forces, which meant you were probably a witch who needed to be eliminated. The problem was that it was almost impossible to prove you belonged to the naturally gifted category. Any attempt to use or enjoy your beauty suggested supernatural pride. Any success that came from your appearance suggested supernatural assistance. The converso beauty trap. The Inquisition was particularly focused on conversos Jews and Muslims who had converted to Christianity, and beautiful converso women faced double jeopardy. Not only was their beauty considered potentially supernatural, but it was also viewed as a tool for seducing good Christians away from proper religious devotion. Beautiful converso women were accused of using their appearance to corrupt Christian men maintaining Jewish or Muslim beauty practices that were considered heretical, concealing their true religious beliefs behind attractive facades, serving as agents for non-Christian communities seeking to undermine Christian society. The logic was circular and impossible to escape. If you were beautiful and converso, your beauty was evidence of your deceptive nature. If you downplayed your beauty, that was evidence that you were trying to hide your true nature. If you used your beauty successfully, that was evidence of supernatural assistance. The limpieza de sangre beauty standards. The Inquisition promoted limpieza de sangre, purity of blood standards that included specific ideas about what properly Christian beauty should look like. These standards were based on ethnic and religious stereotypes that made certain types of beauty automatically suspect. Properly Christian beauty was supposed to include fair skin that suggested Northern European ancestry, light-colored eyes and hair, facial features that matched medieval artistic depictions of Christian saints, body proportions that suggested modesty and spiritual refinement, overall appearance that was attractive but not exotic or sensual. Beautiful women who didn't fit these standards, especially those with darker coloring, distinctive features, or anything that suggested non-Christian ancestry, were automatically more likely to be investigated by the Inquisition. The witchcraft-beauty connection. The Inquisition developed elaborate theories connecting female beauty to witchcraft. According to Inquisition manuals, women could use witchcraft to enhance their natural beauty beyond normal human limits, maintain their attractiveness past the normal aging process, use their appearance to seduce and corrupt men, gain social and economic advantages through supernatural means. This created a catch-22 for beautiful women. Maintaining your appearance suggested vanity, a sin, or witchcraft, a capital crime. Letting your appearance decline suggested you were losing supernatural assistance or being punished by God for hidden sins. The Inquisition investigation process. If you were a beautiful woman who came under Inquisition suspicion, the investigation process was designed to be psychologically and physically devastating, regardless of whether you were actually guilty of anything. Phase 1. Denunciation. Someone would report you to Inquisition authorities. The reasons could include being too beautiful for a Christian woman, using beauty practices that seemed exotic or non-Christian, having social success that seemed unnatural for someone of your background being associated with anyone already under investigation. Phase 2. Secret investigation. Inquisition officials would secretly investigate your beauty maintenance routines, looking for evidence of supernatural assistance. Social relationships, looking for evidence of corrupting influence. Family background, looking for evidence of non-Christian ancestry. Economic situation, looking for evidence of supernatural financial assistance. Phase 3. Arrest and interrogation. If the secret investigation found anything suspicious, you would be arrested and interrogated about the source of your beauty, natural versus supernatural, your religious practices and beliefs, your relationships with men, looking for evidence of seduction and corruption, any knowledge of witchcraft, Judaism, Islam, or other heretical practices. Phase 4. Trial. Your beauty would be used as evidence during your trial. Witnesses would testify about your unnatural attractiveness. Experts would examine you for signs of supernatural enhancement. Your behavior, clothing, and mannerisms would be analyzed for evidence of non-Christian influences. Any success or advantage you'd gained from your appearance would be cited as evidence of supernatural assistance. The torture and beauty. The Inquisition used torture to extract confessions, and beautiful women faced specific types of torture designed to destroy their appearance. While extracting information, facial disfigurement, methods designed to permanently damage beautiful faces, because destroying the source of suspected supernatural power was considered spiritually necessary. Hair removal, complete removal of hair, which was considered potentially supernatural if it was unusually beautiful or well maintained. Public humiliation. Beautiful women were often tortured publicly, partly to extract confessions and partly to demonstrate that physical beauty provided no protection against religious authority. Psychological torture, extended interrogation, focused on the relationship between the victim's beauty and their supposed supernatural activities. The auto-da-fe spectacles. If you were convicted by the Inquisition, your punishment would be carried out during an auto-da-fe public ceremony, designed to demonstrate the triumph of religious authority over heresy. Beautiful women who were executed during these ceremonies faced additional humiliation. Their beauty was publicly renounced as evidence of demonic influence. They were forced to confess that their attractiveness had been used to corrupt others. Their execution was presented as a liberation of their souls from supernatural bondage. Their appearance was described in detail as a warning to other women about the dangers of excessive beauty. The psychological impact on other beautiful women was enormous. They witnessed that their own physical attributes could be used as evidence against them in religious courts where the standards of proof were essentially non-existent. The social paranoia. The Inquisition created a culture of beauty paranoia that extended far beyond formal religious investigations. Spanish society during this period became obsessed with identifying and reporting suspicious beauty. Neighbors, friends, and even family members were encouraged to report women who seemed too confident about their appearance, beauty practices that seemed foreign or non-Christian, social success that seemed disproportionate to a woman's natural advantages, any association with people who had been investigated by the Inquisition. This created a social environment where beautiful women had to constantly prove their religious orthodoxy and downplay their physical advantages to avoid suspicion. The economic beauty persecution. The Inquisition also had economic motivations for persecuting beautiful women. Wealthy families with beautiful daughters were particularly vulnerable, because Inquisition authorities could confiscate the property of convicted heretics, providing financial incentives for persecution. Beautiful women from wealthy families were more likely to have social connections that could be investigated for heresy. Successful beauty-related businesses, cosmetics, fashion, jewelry, were considered potentially suspicious and could be targeted for investigation. The psychological survival strategies. Beautiful women during the Inquisition developed various survival strategies to avoid persecution. Religious extremism, becoming overly pious and religious to demonstrate orthodox Christianity. Social withdrawal, becoming reclusive to avoid attention and potential denunciation. Some women deliberately damaged their appearance to remove the temptation that their beauty presented. Economic sacrifice, giving away wealth and advantages to demonstrate that they weren't benefiting from supernatural assistance. Marriage strategy, marrying men with unquestioned religious orthodoxy to gain protection through association. The regional variations. Different regions of Spain developed their own variations of beauty-related persecution. Andalusia, focus on eliminating Muslim beauty influences. Catalonia, emphasis on French and foreign beauty standards. Valencia, particular attention to converso beauty practices. Castile, integration of beauty, persecution with broader social control. The long-term cultural damage. The Inquisition's persecution of beauty had lasting effects on Spanish culture. Beauty standards, Spanish beauty ideals became more conservative and religiously oriented. Social behavior. Beautiful women learned to be extremely cautious about displaying or using their attractiveness. Economic impact. beauty-related industries and trades were damaged by suspicion and persecution. Psychological effects. Generations of Spanish women grew up fearing that their natural attractiveness could be used against them. Now, let's cross the Atlantic to colonial America, where Puritan religious extremism created one of the most concentrated examples of beauty-based persecution in history. The Salem witch trials of 1692 to 1693. You're a beautiful young woman in Salem, Massachusetts. It's February 1692, and you wake up in a community where your physical attractiveness has just become potential evidence that you're in league with Satan. The Puritan obsession with spiritual purity has turned natural beauty into supernatural suspicion. And you're about to discover that being gorgeous in a Puritan community can literally get you hanged. Puritan theology created a unique problem with female beauty. On one hand, God created all things, so beauty should reflect divine creation. On the other hand, beauty was associated with vanity, temptation, and worldly concerns that distracted from spiritual devotion. This theological tension meant that beautiful women in Puritan communities lived under constant scrutiny. Too much attention to your appearance suggested sinful vanity. Too little attention suggested disrespect for God's creation. Any social advantage gained from beauty suggested pride and worldly concerns. Any male attention attracted by beauty suggested temptation and sexual impropriety, the ideal. Puritan woman was supposed to be modestly attractive, but completely unaware of and uninterested in her own beauty, a psychological impossibility that set beautiful women up for failure. The Salem witch trials targeted specific types of beautiful women with terrifying consistency. Bridget Bishop, the first person executed in Salem. She was described as unusually attractive and was accused of using her beauty to seduce men and corrupt the community. Her crime: operating a tavern where she was friendly to male customers while being an attractive woman. Sarah Good, a beautiful woman whose family had fallen on hard economic times. The logic of her accusation was that someone so attractive should have been able to secure better economic circumstances. Naturally, therefore, her poverty suggested she was being punished by God or had made deals with Satan. Martha Corey, an attractive woman who expressed skepticism about the witch trials themselves. Her beauty was used as evidence that she was confident in her supernatural protection and therefore must be a witch. The accusations against beautiful women in Salem followed predictable patterns that reveal how beauty was weaponized by the Puritan community. Pattern 1: economic resentment. Beautiful women who had achieved economic success were accused of using supernatural means to gain unfair advantages. Pattern 2: social jealousy. Women whose beauty gave them social influence or popularity were accused of using witchcraft to manipulate community members. Pattern 3: sexual suspicion. Any beautiful woman who attracted male attention was accused of using supernatural seduction to corrupt men and threaten marriages. Pattern 4: religious challenge. Beautiful women who questioned religious authority or showed independence were accused of getting their confidence from demonic sources. Salem introduced the concept of spectral evidence, the idea that accused witches could send their spirits to torment victims even while their physical bodies were elsewhere. This created a particularly deadly trap for beautiful women, because their physical attractiveness was used as evidence that their spirits would be especially effective at supernatural seduction and corruption. The logic was circular and impossible to disprove. If you were beautiful, your spirit would be more capable of supernatural seduction if someone claimed to be tormented by your spirit. Your beauty made the claim more credible if you denied sending your spirit. That was evidence of deception and supernatural cunning if you admitted to any spiritual activity, like prayer or religious contemplation. That was evidence you had supernatural abilities. Accused witches in Salem were subjected to physical examinations, looking for witches' marks or other evidence of supernatural influence. For beautiful women, these examinations were particularly invasive and humiliating. Body searches for unusual marks, moles, or features that could be interpreted as supernatural signs. Beauty analysis, where examiners looked for evidence that the woman's attractiveness was beyond normal human limits. Age assessments, to determine if the woman looked younger than she should naturally appear. Behavioral observation during the examination, to see if the woman showed supernatural confidence or composure. These examinations were conducted by male religious authorities and often became opportunities for sexual humiliation. Disguised as religious investigation, the Salem authorities used a confession system that was particularly devastating for beautiful women. If you confessed to witchcraft, you admitted that your beauty came from supernatural sources. You were forced to renounce your appearance as evidence of your evil nature. You became a witness against other beautiful women in the community. You might avoid execution, but faced lifetime social exile and suspicion if you refused to confess. Your beauty was used as evidence of supernatural pride and confidence. Your denial was interpreted as proof of your dangerous supernatural abilities. You faced certain execution. Your death was presented as necessary to protect the community from your corrupting influence. Salem's witch trials revealed how community jealousy and resentment could be channeled through religious persecution. Less attractive women in the community often became accusers, using religious authority to eliminate beautiful rivals. Married men who had been attracted to beautiful women could now claim they had been bewitched, rather than admit to normal sexual attraction. Community leaders could eliminate beautiful women who challenged their authority by claiming religious necessity. Economic competitors could destroy beautiful women's businesses and social influence through supernatural accusations. The Salem trials created a form of psychological warfare that specifically targeted beautiful women's mental health. Isolation. Beautiful women were isolated from friends and family who were afraid of being associated with suspected witches. Self-doubt. Constant accusations made beautiful women question whether their appearance really was supernatural or evil. Religious anxiety. Beautiful women were forced to examine every aspect of their spiritual lives for evidence of supernatural influence. Social paranoia. Beautiful women could no longer trust anyone in their community, because neighbors, friends, and even family members could become accusers. When beautiful women were executed in Salem, their deaths were turned into public spectacles that sent messages to other attractive women in the community. Public renunciation. Beautiful condemned women were forced to publicly renounce their appearance and any advantages they had gained from it. Warning speeches. Their executions included speeches warning other women about the dangers of beauty, vanity, and supernatural temptation. Body disposal. The bodies of executed beautiful women were often denied proper burial, as if their attractiveness continued to be dangerous even after death. Community attendance. Other beautiful women were sometimes required to attend executions as a warning about the consequences of supernatural beauty. Beautiful women who survived the Salem witch trials faced long-term psychological and social consequences. Permanent suspicion. They remained under community surveillance for the rest of their lives. Social isolation. Many community members continued to avoid them out of fear or continued suspicion. Economic damage. Their businesses and economic opportunities were permanently damaged by association with witchcraft accusations. Family impact. Their children and family members also faced ongoing suspicion and social disadvantage. Psychological damage. Many survivors suffered from what we would now recognize as PTSD, anxiety, and depression. The Salem witch trials influenced how beauty was viewed throughout colonial America. Beauty suspicion. Other colonial communities developed similar suspicions about unusually attractive women. Religious beauty standards. Puritan communities developed increasingly strict standards about appropriate appearance and behavior for women. Legal precedents. The use of physical attractiveness as evidence in legal proceedings continued in other contexts. Cultural transmission. Anti-beauty attitudes spread through Puritan communities across New England. After the Salem witch trials ended, colonial authorities worked to minimize and cover up the role that beauty persecution had played in the events. Official records were edited to remove references to appearance-based accusations. Historical narratives focused on religious extremism while ignoring gender and beauty-based motivations. Community memory was actively managed to avoid acknowledging how jealousy and beauty resentment had driven the persecutions. Legal reforms addressed procedural issues without acknowledging how physical appearance had been weaponized. This historical cover-up has contributed to modern misunderstanding of how beauty-based persecution has operated throughout American history.